Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees. Today is August 27th. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. You'll all rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Karen Thomas, may I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Model.
Here.
Trustee Baveza.
Here.
Trustee Martall. Here. Trustee Snyder.
Here.
Trustee Skiappa.
Here.
Mayor Straub.
Here. Our first order of business tonight is on a very sad occasion, as many of you already know, that we lost our village arborist, who was also supervisor in forestry and grounds division, Gary Gatlin, recently. And Gary was very well known because very few positions touch virtually every aspect of our village, every resident, than an arborist, due to the sheer number of trees we have in the village. And Gary was there for every planning, every Arbor Day celebration and school function, and he'll be sadly missed by us all. I know our village administrator, I'm going to ask the village administrator to say a few words, and also I understand some of Gary's family is here tonight. They're welcome to say a few words before we do the moment of silence, after Doug says a few words. So,
thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the family members for spending time with the village employees and myself this afternoon. It was very meaningful for us to spend time with Gary's family. And thank you for bringing Gary to the village. Gary was a very valued member of our family, our group, our village family. And Gary contributed a tremendous amount to this village. And I know residents throughout the community always appreciated his work in preserving the trees, his passion for the village and for our landscape. But most of all, myself, the employees, and those he interacted with the village appreciated his kindness, his graciousness, his courtesy, his professionalism, and his knowledge of his work. Gary brought a lot to us. He is already greatly missed by us and will continue to be missed. So, Gary, please rest in peace.
would any of his family members like to address the village and say a few words? If you come forward, and is there a loose microphone, or you just want to speak out loud? Yeah. You're welcome. Please.
All right. Okay. Hi. I want to thank you all for coming. My name is Candace. I'm Gary Gatlin's daughter, firstborn. Maybe probably a favorite. Really touched to have been able to see where he spent most of his days today in the village of Fur Ridge. You guys weren't just his colleagues, you were his friends. And this wasn't just a job to him, this was his passion, and we appreciated all of the gratitude that you guys gave to him. Lord knows we certainly did not thank him for the things that he did around our house. Plant-wise, went one thing, but it was, I know, wonderful for him to get to have that with you guys and share his passion and really watch this grow. One of the more beautiful things I think Dave Preissig, who is here today, he said that his footprints are all around the city and everything that he planted, all the trees, all that. I think that was wonderful and really struck a chord with me. Thank you guys all.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, wait, can I do one more thing? Sorry.
Sure.
No, the applause again. There's some issues. My wonderful mother here, Sandra, they were married for 35 years and together for 40. And my brother, William, who is rolling his eyes right now.
And if you'll join me in a moment of silence. Okay, thank you again, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And now we're going to have a section for the residents' comments. I'd like to just point out a couple things first. I see a lot of residents are here. We have a couple of very important topics on the agenda. For all residents who would like to speak tonight, we have a sign-up sheet up front, and it's designed to have if anyone wants to sign up, please sign up before we get through the consent agenda. And the purpose of that is to also remind everybody that this is a board meeting. It's not a town hall meeting. We certainly want to hear your voice, but want to have it in a controlled fashion and be able to know who's speaking, et cetera. So it will be available for signing in up until we're done with the consent agenda. Now, also, any residents would like to speak on topic, when that topic comes on, that's the best time to make your point. The idea is to not, you're welcome to speak now, but the key point is then. Is there anybody like to address the board prior to the topic coming up? Please raise your hand. Okay, one person? Okay, then I'll allow you to come to the microphone, please, and introduce yourself and your his name and where you're from.
Use the microphone, yes?
Yes.
All right. Good evening. My name is Dave Palzett. I am the superintendent of schools at Pleasantdale School District 107, and while not a Burr Ridge resident, I am representing some of the youngest members of your community. There's an agenda item on your agenda tonight where you'll be discussing allowing the use of a gate between two subdivisions, Arrowhead Farms and Highland Fields subdivisions. And this is a gate that has actually been in use by the school district for over a decade. Current practice is to allow the bus to go back and forth to pick up and drop off students. By not being allowed to, if we were not allowed to use that bus, it would require students to walk a much more significant distance to get to their bus. In some of those winter months where it's darker and snowy, that could cause some hazardous situations. We have several students who are in kindergarten or first grade. Again, would cause some undue issues for families having to have their children walk a much longer distance to get to the bus. All we're asking tonight is for the board to simply legitimize the practice that's already been in place for over a decade. While we realize that that this is a community forum, that we want to work through any issues that may occur with the use of the gate with the community, with the residents within the community, and we're open to having those conversations. But again, all we're asking tonight is that the board kind of legitimize the practice that's already been in place for so long. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda, otherwise known as the omnibus vote. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the village board. It will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed. Under minutes, we have 5A, approval of regular board meeting of August 13th, 2018. B, receive and file planning commission meeting of August 20th, 2018. Under ordinances, 6A, approval of an ordinance annexing certain real estate at the Marshall property at 8400 Oak Knoll Drive. B, approval of an ordinance rezoning property from the R1 district to the R2A district of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance number Z18-2018 located at the 8400 Oak Knoll Drive. C, approval of ordinance amending the Village of Burr Ridge Personnel Manual adopted by ordinance number 661. Under resolutions, 7A, adoption of resolution approving plat of easement and vacation at Meadowbrook Place subdivision. Under considerations, we have 8D, approval of proclamation designating September 17th to 23rd, 2018 as Constitution Week in the Village of Burr Ridge. E, approval of a recommendation to award contract for replacement of Chasemore Lincolnshire Pathway to Globe Construction Incorporated of Addison, Illinois, in the amount of $119,886. F, approval of Plan Commission recommendation to approve a private sanitary sewer system for a new single-family residence. That's number PC 09-2018 at 8600 County Line Road, Camarena. G, approval recommendation to award contract for replacement of windows at Village Hall to Your American Windows, LLC of Burr Ridge, Illinois, in the amount of $13,639. H, approval recommendation to award contract for repairs to the Police Department HVAC system to Dynamic Heating and Piping Company of Crestwood, Illinois, in the amount of $14,950. I, approval of Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins legal fees for 2019. J, approval of proclamation designating October 2018 as Arts Page Month. K, receive and file a letter of resignation from local school committee member Alan Herbie effective August 17th, 2018. L, approval of vendor list in the amount of $625,345.41 for all funds, plus $184,339 for payroll, for a grand total of $809,684.41, which includes no special expenditures. Can I have a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda? We have 5A and B, 6A, B, and C, 7A, 8, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and L.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Beza?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. First item for discussion is under considerations is the request from Pleasantdale School District 107 to permit use of Arrowhead Farm Highland Fields gate by public school buses.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, in your packet is a letter from Superintendent Dave Paulzat, who spoke earlier tonight, from Pleasantdale School District 107. The letter is a request to allow school buses to use the gate located between Arrowhead Farm and Highland Fields subdivisions that gates off two public streets, Omaha Drive and Johnston Road. The gate was erected approximately 17 years ago by the developer of the Highland Fields subdivision. The village board at that time made a commitment to the residents of Arrowhead Farm that the gate would only be used by emergency vehicles. Subsequently, the school district has used the gate for school buses only, and we're not sure when or how that started, but I became aware of it last year and had requested that the school district come to the board if they wanted to continue to use it, so that you would have the opportunity either to say that they can continue to use it or not. Mr. Paulzat's letter does make some suggestions that could be helpful in allowing the school buses to continue to use the gate. One is they've suggested that they would install improved signage which warns people that are motorists that they are not allowed to use the gate other than buses and emergency vehicles. They've talked about installation of cameras on either side of the gate and installation of temporary speed bumps when the gate is not operable. The gate has been inoperable at times over the course of the last several years. When it becomes inoperable, typically the village will open the gates so that emergency vehicles can get through, and at those times anyone can get through it. Now, this last time it was inoperable, we did put up barricades and caution tape, which is not desirable, but at least it prevents a few people from going through it, maybe not everybody. So at this time, the school board is asking that you allow the buses to use the gate. I should also mention again that as per the agreement, when the Highland Fields subdivision was built, that the Highland Fields Homeowners Association is responsible for maintaining the gate, even even though it's on village property and is village property. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have about the background on this issue or moving forward.
It's just for order of things, first the board asked for clarification from the village administrator regarding this topic. And then after that, it'll be followed by the residents, anybody who wants to speak about it. And then at which time it goes back to the board meeting, stays at the board for final discussion and vote. First off, Tony?
If this has been ongoing for 10 years, what prompted this to
Well,
be on the
I
agenda tonight?
received phone calls from residents saying, suggesting that early in the summer, suggesting that this issue be addressed and resolved before the school year started. I had some interactions with the school superintendent and principal. They had a change in personnel, which I think slowed things down a little bit. The person I'd been in contact with before had left. But it came out of that initial
The issue being school
inquiry.
buses using the gate.
Right,
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Trustee Matal?
Did the residents of both subdivisions have an issue or just one subdivision?
I have only gotten complaints about school buses from residents at Arrowhead Farm. I have not gotten complaints from Highland Fields. And in fact, the Highland Fields Homeowners Association president, who I have not talked to lately, I've tried to reach out to him. In the past, he's indicated his support for allowing the school buses to use the gate.
Has the president of the Highlands and president of Arrowheads Association got together and had any kind of discussion together before coming to us?
I have encouraged that. I don't know, I don't think, but I don't know for sure whether they've ever talked.
Wouldn't it be better if they have a discussion first before it comes in front of us?
That's what I had suggested.
Thank you.
This is a public street, correct, Doug? Are there
Yes.
any other gates like this in the community at all, or is this the only one?
It is the only one on a public street. The other gated subdivisions are private streets that are privately owned and privately maintained.
Got it. So the other gated communities, if they have gates, they're totally gated and they pay for the maintenance of their streets and sidewalks and all that on their own. Okay.
Snow plowing and repair and resurfacing.
Okay.
Trustee Matal?
So the gate, what is the purpose of it? To keep the two subdivisions separate or to protect people? What is the purpose?
When it was
Initially put in?
initially put in, it was to prevent cut-through traffic. So in other words, when Arrowhead Farm was there first,
Uh-huh.
and Highland Fields, or Arrowhead Farm was more or less fully developed, fully occupied.
Right.
Highland Fields comes along, it's a vacant land. The developer was laying out a subdivision, and in the review process, the issue of the connection of the streets came up. And rather than not connecting the streets, the developer and the village board at that time agreed to connect the streets with a gate for emergency vehicles only. And that, again, was in response to concerns from Arrowhead Farm residents about cut-through traffic.
Right, only at the time of construction or thereafter?
I think their concern was long-term, was just, ongoing, additional cars using their streets.
Did the fire department have any role in that?
Yeah, the fire department certainly wanted to have the ability to access through there for emergency situations,
Right.
as does our police.
You mean for the gate or for the street itself?
I think it's fair to say that the emergency responders they didn't care if a gate was there, but they wanted the street connected so that they could use it.
Right.
They could get from one side to the other in an emergency.
Well, at the time this was brought up, Arrowhead basically was complete and one of the top subdivisions in the village. And from the input that we have, they were very apprehensive about exactly what Highland Field was going to become and the traffic and all the other things that were applied to it. I know the board was not in favor of putting the gate up, but there were a lot of extenuating circumstances at the time. One of them being is that Jack Johnson was throwing in our faces about leaving and moving to Willow Springs for quarter-acre lots. And we had to do a lot of negotiating, and so the board felt at that time putting the gate in to alleviate the concerns of the Arrowhead Farm people was probably the best way to go. I know one of the questions they had were traffic. I know at the time I brought it up, Burroughs Glen South, I believe we've got over 80 houses in the subdivision.
80 homes.
One entrance in and out, and in the 25 years I was been there, I don't think more than 1 or 2 cars were ever in front of me. So I think the traffic problem was a little overstated, but anyway, at that point, the board felt that probably was the best way to go and agreed agreed to put in the gate.
Trustee Francis?
Just to clarify something you said, Doug, so the developer installed the gate, he purchased it, installed the gate, it's on village property. Now the village owns the gate, and the Highland Fields Homeowners Association manages it, correct? Okay.
Well, they maintain it.
I'm saying maintain it. Village manages it. So thinking, adding on to what Al was saying about when this was brought in, originally it was envisioned that when the property was to be developed, now known as Highland Fields, Omaha Drive was built as a stub street to connect. It was the original vision was to connect further to the south to that property, which is now known as Highland Fields. And for a variety of reasons, one was cut through traffic. The gate was asked for by Arrowhead Farms folks and installed by Highland Fields. So just to add on to that.
Okay. Any questions, Doug? Okay, just so I know who on this sign-up sheet wants to speak on this topic, I'm going to call out your name, and if it's if you want to talk on this topic, just let me know. First name was Ursa Morrissey, I think it is, on this topic, okay? Dave Palzett, of course, if you'd like to, hold on, we'll wait a second. Mazen Kauji. Anaz Al-Zubi. Matt Petrich. Okay. Sorry, I probably should put my glasses on. And Adnan Arif. Okay. And that's yes? You want to talk on this one? Okay. First one, Dave? Oh, so you already spoke, so that counted as your statement? Okay. Want to make sure. Mason? Mr. Augie? Or is it Kaji? Yes. Yes, microphone, and just introduce yourself, where you live, and correct pronunciation of your name. So hopefully I didn't butcher it too much.
So, Mazen, M-A-Z-E-N, Kauji, K-A-W-J-I.
Mazen?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. I live in Highland Field, and I've been living there for 6 years. I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to purchase my current house. So anyway, I think to me, the issue of the school is a no-brainer. I think we should allow the school bus, but I'm here to tell you about the inconvenience that gate is creating for my friends, for my people who come to do any repair. Because with the navigation system, everybody who's coming from the east or the southern part of the city, they're gonna come through to on German Church Road, and then go to Arrowhead, and they see the gate, which obviously the navigation system will not be aware of, and then they will be calling me if I'm home, if I'm at work. Sometimes I don't get the phone call. I think it's creating a problem for at least it's inconvenient for this to be there. And like Guy mentioned that, or I think Albert, the issue of the heavy traffic, you have only 70 or 80 houses. It's not a big deal. So I think this gate it's maybe helping a little bit Arrowhead but on the expense of people who are living on Highland. It will save us some time if we want to go, instead of going through Johnston Road and then County Line and then making a turn on German Church, we can use Arrowhead. And I don't think the traffic is that heavy at all. Like you mentioned, you've been living there for 25 years and you hardly have 2 or 3 cars. So I will recommend that if you can remove the gate completely, I think this will be appreciated by us. Thank you very much again for giving me the chance.
Anas? Was I close on pronunciation?
You're right.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. Thank you very much for not making a mistake in my name, which is very common. Thank you much for having me here today. Let me talk to you, address you. I share the concern of the Pleasantdale School District about keeping the gate open, and I go further, actually asking the board what's the legitimacy and the need for it at the current time. There is no project being built on Highland Field, as I know. There is no structural building. There is no cut traffic through traffic except for the residents. So I'm asking the board, what's the need for the gate right now as we speak? Actually, it does create more trouble for the resident on both sides rather than having or making a solution for a problem that is not existed at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order, where did he live? I can assume, but.
Do I, can I assume you live in Highland Fields?
Oh, no, sorry, I live in Arrowhead Farm.
Oh, you live in Arrowhead Farm?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. And Matt, Patrick?
Put a camera on that gate.
Good evening, everyone. I've been in front of all of you talking about the board, the gate before, so I'm not going to go in depth on all this stuff, but let's go through a couple of things. One, from Highland Field's perspective, we would get rid of the gate in a heartbeat. We pay for it, we don't want it. That's here nor there. But ultimately, it's our responsibility to keep the gate operational, which prior to our current president being here, I was president of Highland Fields for about 3 years. We had one gate maintenance issue in 3 years. And it's not the actual maintenance of the gate, the movement of the gate, it's the circuit board. And it's because of weather, like rain and snow. So there is probably something that we could do talking to the company that we deal with that actually fixes the gate. Maybe we can put those circuit boards in more of a watertight enclosure. I don't know, I'm just bringing that up, but it's never been a gate issue, Mayor. It's always been something with the circuit board that's caused problems. But on the other hand, as soon as we knew that there was an issue with the gate, we immediately had people out to fix it. So I don't know, I don't really see that being too much of an issue anymore. We have cameras and signage at the entrance to Highland Fields saying that there's no through traffic, right? So I'm struggling with the fact that there would be a lot of traffic even if the gates were open. I just don't see it, and I live on Johnston Road. So we had worked with the village police department to actually lower the speed limits within Highland Fields. We actually did car counts in order to do that, and the car count is pretty low going through Johnston Road. So I'm not sure why someone would come into our subdivision with a sign that says there's no cutting through, there's big cameras, drive all the way to the end of Johnston to go through that gate to go through Arrowhead Farm. So it's just, I don't know. Is there a car or two that may do it? Possibly, but I would love to know like the actual numbers, because Mayor, there can't be too many of them. So, all right. The traffic issue, we've got the cameras and the signage. I don't know what else to tell you. The issue isn't the gate, it isn't the subdivisions, it's the safety of kids. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. So, Doug, you had mentioned, Doug, is it okay if I call you Doug?
Please do.
We talk enough on the phone. But you made an interesting point. You said that there's some comment or some agreement that had occurred 17 years ago between Highland Fields and Arrowhead Farms. I've lived there for a long time. I don't know about that agreement per se, but to be honest with you, if it were me, you guys can't be telling me that that agreement at the time when those subdivisions were built overrides the safety of kids having to walk down Johnston Road in the middle of the winter. There's no way. At least, that's my opinion. You can tell me differently. But I mean, that's the bottom line to all this. So anyways, the bottom line is the gate's operational. We keep it operational as much as possible. We pay for it. And all we're asking is that the kids just don't have to walk down Johnston Road. And like Dr. Pelzit said, it's really, you know, the winter, it's dark, and that's what we're trying to avoid, especially younger kids. I mean, if it was my kids, they're in 7th grade, it's okay. But 1st and 2nd graders, we don't want that happening. So, any questions for me? Because I've been living this for 5 years.
Just to be clear, you do live in Highland Fields?
I'm in Highland, I was
Thank
the
you.
president of Highland Fields for just shy of 3 years, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So when the circuit board would fail or the gate would fail, how would you become notified of that?
Someone would typically tell us that the gate is either stuck closed or stuck open, or even we would get a call from the school district saying that the clickers don't work.
How would you know it was stuck closed?
I would, okay, I'm not being a smart guy, but I would drive by and the gate was closed, and they would say it's not operational with the clickers.
Okay.
Right. Sorry, I wasn't clear. So then we would have the guys come out. The last time we got the circuit boards done, Maggie might have done something post that, but we made sure there's actually, as for the fire department and the police cars, rollers open it and the siren. So now we've actually added a second way that the emergency vehicles can get through. So, and that works pretty well.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir.
You said that Highland Fields has a camera security system, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Your current president, did he ever reach out to Arrowhead's current
Yeah,
president?
in fact, we all did. Mac, myself, and is Denise here by any chance? Oh, Denise. Yeah, yeah, everybody was on board. In fact, Denise and I have talked many times via phone. We never saw each other. But yeah, we talked it all out, and everybody was on the same page in terms of the use of the buses for the gate, yes. Denise, I'm not overstating that, am I?
No, I mean, it was about from the kid's perspective to the bus stand through. However, we do need to work on the issue that when the gate does break on occasion, that it is a more formal process.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop you. We're not unable to hear you on the microphones if you're not at the wings. Hold on a second. You're actually, I'm gonna go the order of the people that signed up first, but you're welcome to address that after Matt is done.
Anything else? Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And Adnan Reed.
I have some written notes, so I'm just gonna use my phone too. But yeah, I live in Highland Fields on Johnston Road. We have 3 boys. One just started elementary, 1st grade. Just got on the bus. He was pretty nervous about it, but he made it okay. And 2 in middle school. So yeah, I think it would cause undue hardship on our children, especially if we, keep our children's safety in mind, to have to walk uphill in winter where I live, all the way up the hill, around a bend. I think there are 10 houses along the way, and wait for the bus. And I just feel that our kids should not be penalized for a gate that rarely does not work, but can be easily fixed in due course of time. Also, it is a public road, and I think it's important to remember that that is a gate on a public road. And so if the Highland Fields residents are asking to have it used just for the school buses and the emergency vehicles, I would support that strongly. So that's about it.
And where do you live?
Highland Fields.
Highland Fields.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Denise, is it? Okay. If you weren't on the list, but I'd love to hear from you.
So I'm Denise Kent. I'm president of Arrowhead Farms. I will speak personally that I am in favor of the buses being able to use the gate for the kids. As president of Arrowhead Farms, I want to state our position that we absolutely want to maintain the gate for the traffic that comes from Highland Fields through Arrowhead. I have personally witnessed traffic at a high speed coming down Arrowhead Farms off of Johnston. It's not everybody in Highland Fields. If you looked at the map, there's about 75 homes in Highland Field. Arrowhead Farms has about 37 homes. About half of the subdivision, more or less, would benefit from using the Arrowhead Farm route to go to German Church Road. So we do have a very valid and real concern for the safety of our Arrowhead Farm community if the gate did not exist. My understanding is we're here to talk about whether the buses can use the gate through Highland Fields and Arrowhead Farms, and I personally am in support of that. I would like to see a formal process for fixing the gate on the occasion that it is broken. I've lived in Arrowhead Farm for 4 years. During the time that it's been broken, only once or twice. This last time it was broken June 15th. The school buses were not using the gate. I've also been privy to some information from Doug and Dr. Paulzett that the company that manufactures the gate does indeed support that the gate is made for daily use. That was a concern that I was told, that the gate is not made for daily use, and now I've been told that that is incorrect. So in light of the information that the gate is made for daily use, it would be best for the safety of the kids. I'm in favor of the gate being used.
Any questions?
So are there residents in your community, though, who are opposed to allow the school buses
Of
to
the
use that?
37 residents in Arrowhead Farms, I've heard from 2 to 3 residents that seem to not want the buses to use the gate because they're under the understanding that the gate was not made for daily use.
Okay.
You said when the gate was closed, there was some traffic. Do you have any idea numbers-wise of what you're talking about as far as traffic going through from Highland Fields?
You know, I have young kids that like to ride their bikes and their scooters, and I'm at the bus stop every day. So I'm there during, business hours with the kids and in the early evening. And on the occasions when the gate was broken, I would be out there for maybe an hour or so, and I would see 2 to 3 cars coming from Highland Fields. And some of them were at a little fast of a clip than I was comfortable with. I thought Dr. Paulzett had some great suggestions for putting temporary speed bumps in place should the gate be broken for a prolonged period of time in the open position.
Also, you have no children being picked up by the school bus?
Oh, no, I do. I have a kindergartner and a 6th grader. And we're in Arrowhead.
Would it be easier to continue on rather than go all the way around?
You know,
That's kind of the point. She's in favor of school buses using it. So.
I mean, otherwise they'd have to reroute the bus in some way, maybe.
Right.
I really am thinking of the Highland Field family. If I was on the other side of the gate and I had little ones in kindergarten and 1st grade, I would.
And we would all like to be on a cul-de-sac with small children.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There are no other names on the list, but I'll make one exception. Do you want to speak?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yep, please come to the microphone, please. Your name, please?
Is there a microphone here or no?
Okay.
Oh, okay. My name is William Stone. I was president of Arrowhead Farms on 2 occasions. I've been there for 25 years. I know almost everybody on the board. And I just wanted to mention, first, Mayor, never had a chance to sign. You asked us to sign when we had already been seated, and I was buried behind the crowd, so I didn't go up there to put my name. So thank you for bearing with me. And I'll be very brief. The agenda item is really buses or no buses. And I think I heard someone mention from Highland Fields, no, I actually think Doug Pollock mentioned that the president from Highland Fields has no objection to the buses going through Highland Fields. And Arrowhead Farm has no objection to the buses going through Arrowhead Farm. So I don't think we need to go any further with this discussion. I think everybody can just go about the next business that you have. The people have come up here and asked to remove the fence. That's an entirely different issue that's not before the board. And if that issue is ever before the board, we'll certainly probably have, we'll have to reserve probably 24 hours of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the subject is back. Oh, you want to speak too? Do I have to make two exceptions?
My name is Leslie Hickey, and I live in Arrowhead Farm, and I live at the gate in Arrowhead Farm. I have a little bit of a question as to why the school bus company thinks that it is unsafe to, you know, if it makes it safer to use the gate. You're picking up the kids along the route. At the end of the route, you turn around, you go back out, and so I fail to see that point. It makes it a little longer. It makes it a little more inconvenient. But I have a problem with the safety issue. I know Joe from doing the buses in St. John of the Cross, where my kids went to school. I mean, they came in, they picked everybody up, they went back out. I certainly see a big increase in traffic when that gate is broken. So I'm really opposed to not having that gate there. There's many more homes in Highland Fields. I don't envision too many people from Arrowhead Farm going through Highland Fields for any reason. There's a lot more traffic coming the other way. It's not just the residents, it's their snow plows, it's their lawn maintenance. There's a lot of different traffic that can go through there. I was standing outside talking to somebody in front of my house this morning, and I saw a bus come down. And I said, well, it's coming through the gate because you gave them permission to use it. And it completely turned around, and that turned around and went back up. I don't know what bus that was. It was 8:30. But as I said, I don't have I'm trying to wrap my head around why it's unsafe to not use it. Thank you.
I will ask the superintendent to come back up and answer one question to that. If you'd like to, I don't, again, its purpose is not to be an open.
Sure. So I'll do my best to answer the question, realizing that our bus service is actually contracted through First Student. If they aren't district-owned buses, the drivers aren't district employees. The information that we were given from the bus company was difficulty in turning the buses around. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've never driven the street, so I can't speak to it, and I don't have my CDL and don't drive a bus. One of the things that we were told by the bus company is that at least in part of the route, it would require a slight backup by the bus, and that violates state statute to back up a bus when children are on it. So I know that was an issue. So, you know, I'm going based on the information I'm getting from our bus company, which is it's a safer route to be able to have the pass through. With that said, I think it does also shorten the length of the route. We want to try and keep our kids on the buses, especially when it's a day of 104-degree heat index, make those bus rides as short as possible.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Francis has a question for you.
Good question, please. So this would be grade school and middle school only, correct?
Correct.
And how many bus trips per day, if this were allowed, would we go through the gate?
4, 6, 6.
6 bus trips per day. 3 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pass-throughs, right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, topic is back at the board, and the trustees are going to have a discussion of the pros and cons of this topic and clarification. So, Trustee Schiappa?
So I'm a bit confused as to why it's with us.
What's that?
Why this issue is on our agenda. Because the president of Arrowhead Farms, the president of Highland Fields, agree with buses using the gate. So I guess I'm confused.
How did it happen?
Well,
as why
Agreement didn't allow for it.
if they both agree, why are we talking about
I
it?
think I can speak accurately, and if not, the homeowners association members can correct me, but I don't believe either association has formally taken action in this regard. The individual who happens to be the president of Highland Fields, the individual who happens to be the president of Arrowhead Farms, spoke out in favor of the buses using it. But even if they both associations came to you and said, we're in favor of this, and they formally took a vote and it was unanimous, you'd still have to take action because it's a village board policy
Okay.
enacted in 2001 or whenever that prohibits the buses from using it.
Right. Well, I think in this spirit of community, and we're one village, this is the only gate separating two subdivisions in the village. I think the choice is simple. You know, if Arrowhead wants their own community, they just put a gate at the front and one at the back. But, I mean, I don't see an issue of keeping the gate. Just of having the gate. That gate is on a public road. We have snow going through there, emergency vehicles, buses, and I don't see the reason for the gate. I grew up in Devon, and I remember when Ashton Woods was developed, and they moved a street to allow for Ashton Woods people to come through Devon. There was no gate there. So I'm confused as why the gate still exists. So and in an effort to be a community, village of Burr Ridge, where we are together, it doesn't make sense to separate like that.
Well, in the spirit of cooperation, the two presidents both said we'd like to keep the gate. Keep the gate, slows down traffic, let the individuals use it. Both are in agreement, so I would vote to keep the gate up. Let Highlands continue to maintain it. Find a little better way to maintain it. Have Arrowhead be aware of the maintenance situation. The gate breaks down. There's some kind of an automatic gate. We call somebody from Arrowhead. Everyone knows what's going on. We've contacted the contractor, and we're going to go from there.
Yeah, procedure would be prudent.
Correct.
I agree. I think if police vehicles and firemen are allowed through that gate, school buses should definitely be allowed through that gate. For the kids, we want to make their ride as short and as safe as possible. And I think there should be a procedure with the breakdowns or whatever issues that happen, because apparently that does happen quite frequently. So that needs to be addressed, and they need to figure out how to deal with it. So I'm for it.
Thank you. Trustee Professor?
What I'd really like to see is about a 4 or 6 month period in which the two homeowners association could get together and leave the gate open and just see how much cut-through traffic there really is. Like I said, Highlands Field is pretty secure. They have a video security system, and I think that would be ideal. But up until that time, I remember we did agree, the board did agree to the gate, but I too see no reason why the school buses can't use it.
Yes, I think it's questionable why the gate exists, but I agree that's not what's on our agenda tonight. I think it's pretty clear that the school buses should use this, and we need to amend the agreement to do that. But I'm not looking through the lens that they were looking through in 1998 when they made that agreement, but it seems like questionable governance to me, and that they were unwilling to make a difficult decision because there were some angry residents, and those residents have a right to that feeling, but I think it was a poor decision back then. I think it's questionable why it's there now, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm very much in favor of the school buses using the gate.
Trustee Francis?
So as Mr. Stone so eloquently put before us, this is a question about the school buses using the gate, not the issue of the gate's existence, whether it should continue to exist or not. So sticking to that topic, we should be talking about making a decision whether the school buses should be able to continue to use the gate. They're already using it without permission in violation of the agreement, and we need to formalize that whether or not they should be able to use the gate.
Any other comments or discussion? Do I have any motions?
I'll make a motion to amend the agreement to allow the use of school buses through the gate.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Would this motion also include a formal procedure for notifying Highland Fields in the village when the gate is inoperable so it can be repaired in a timely manner?
Yes.
Yeah, I address that. I think there is a procedure.
There is a procedure?
It's worked well. If anyone, any resident or school bus operator or police, if they see it broken, they contact the village and we
I heard some conversation about how that it took some time to get the gate fixed, so, okay, that's fine then. One other point, I'm a property owner in Arrowhead Farms, and I'll be recusing myself from this vote.
I have one question, and that is, in the unlikely or potential event that the gate has to be replaced, and in the spirit of cooperation, is there anything that we could recommend, or do we need to amend this at all, or I know it's not part of the discussion right now, but to cover how it would be replaced with a new, more current, more reliable gate? Right now, the entire Highland Fields would shoulder that, though, and it seems like it's a 50-50 thing, so if it was to be replaced, would that be an agreement between the two associations to come to an agreement to saying, yes, okay, let's split it? Or would that be, how do we address that, or should we address it this time?
Well, I think we can address that if and when the gate needs to be replaced, but I mean, technically the responsibility for replacing it, if it came to that, would be on the Highland Fields Homeowners Association to replace it in kind. Now, at that time, we would certainly, the village would coordinate that and be in contact with Arrowhead Farm, and if there was an idea of upgrading the quality of the gate and Arrowhead Farm wanted to pitch in to cover the difference or something like that, that's something we would discuss.
Or the school district to maybe go to a third.
Right. Sure.
Just thought I'd offer, just thought I'd offer. Okay, there's been a motion and a second. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Present.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for all of your comments and concern about this very important topic. And welcome to Burr Ridge there, Superintendent. Okay, 8B. This is a consideration of Plan Commission recommendation to approve a special use for a Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to amend the conditions of a prior special use approval for outdoor dining and to deny a variation from the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance for the expansion of an existing restaurant without the required number of parking spaces. For all clarification, and we have, by the way, we have former Mayor Gary Grasso representing the petitioner.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Evan Walter.
I appreciate it. Welcome, members of the public. Thank you, Board. As stated by our Mayor, this is consideration 8B on your agenda this evening. This is a Plan Commission recommendation for petition Z19-2018. This is at 324 Burr Ridge Parkway. The petitioner, as stated, is Gary Grasso on behalf of Capri Restaurant. There are two separate petitions in this particular petition. The first is for a special use to amend the conditions of an existing special use to add additional outdoor seating at an existing sidewalk dining area, as well as to add additional sidewalk dining area. So there's currently 240 square feet of dining area on the sidewalk at Capri Restaurant, out front of the restaurant at the end of County Line Square. They're currently allowed to have 4 tables and 8 chairs for wait service, table wait service with drinks and food and the like at these 8 tables. I'm sorry, 4 tables and 8 chairs. The petition is to add an additional 8 chairs in that area, and then to add an additional sidewalk dining area of 280 square feet to the right side of the door. So the existing sidewalk area is on the left side of the door. The new sidewalk area would be on the right side of the door as we're looking at the restaurant. The additional, thank you, Doug. At the top, we can see the current floor plan that is allowed by the existing special use that was granted in 2015. And on the second floor plan, thank you again, Doug, reading my mind here, would expand to 4 tables and 16 chairs on the right side of the door. So we'd see an expansion of 4 tables and 24 chairs total. Now, with this request also comes a request for a parking variation, basically to operate a restaurant without the number of parking spaces being available. Adding tables on the left side of the door does not require a variation. However, because new floor space is technically being added to the restaurant, only Capri can use this area right here. And both areas. So because that's being added to the restaurant, we need to add parking spaces as well. So the zoning ordinance calls for 1 parking space to be provided for every 100 square feet of restaurant space, plus 1 for every employee at a restaurant. Now, we don't think they're adding any employees for the restaurant, so that doesn't come into effect. So because on the right side, we see 280 square feet, it's 300 square feet if we round up. So it's 3 additional parking spaces that they need a variation for. The variation comes into effect because County Line Square Shopping Center is currently underparked by exactly 51 parking spaces. So there are 432 parking spaces presently available at the property total that are met by the zoning ordinance regulations. County Line Square, like all properties in the village of Burbridge, the parking requirement is calculated based on the individual tenants that are currently at the property. So if we take all of the property's tenants, we add the parking requirements all up, and we get a cumulative number of 483 total spaces presently required to be at the property for sufficient parking to be legally available. So 483 minus 432 equals 51 spaces that they're currently underparked at the property. Not at Capri necessarily, but at County Line Square, the property. The Plan Commission considered this at their last meeting on Monday. There was conclusion that the amended special use is appropriate, but they also recommended that the parking variation be denied. So in this case, the special use cannot be permitted without either 3 additional spaces being provided somewhere at the property, does not have to be right in front of Capri, anywhere on the property, or the variation be granted. So until those conditions are met, either of the conditions, the special use as amended cannot go forward. It cannot be permitted. So those are the basics of the request as well as what occurred at the Plan Commission hearing. There was a lot of discussion about the parking. I think there was a widespread consensus that the special use itself was appropriate. Nobody had, there was no real objection to the special use per se, but there was a debate about how parking should be allocated at the property. Again, we've discussed parking at County Line Square. It is a difficult property with its parking situation, but ultimately the Plan Commission voted that the findings of fact were not met for the variation, which is what all the considerations on this level are considered at. If there's any further questions, I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have, as well as members of the public. So I'll be here.
Questions for Evan?
So if he was adding tables and chairs to the left side of the door, he wouldn't require parking variation?
Yes. So if this was not being added, no variation would be needed.
Okay.
Because he would not be adding any space to his restaurant. Physical space is what the zoning ordinance dictates parking is calculated on. It's not per
How
table.
would he add 4 tables and 16 chairs on the left side then?
So he's currently allowed to have 4 tables and 8 chairs. So he would basically be adding 8 chairs to the existing tables.
Okay.
That's just what the special use that is currently available to Capri currently dictates.
Okay.
I should mention that the zoning ordinance does have a space restriction for outdoor seating. It's one chair for every 10 square feet. So technically, because this is 240 square feet, they would not be breaking any other, it would be permitted to do what they're doing on the left side of the door without any issue.
Okay.
Any other questions, Evan?
Has the owner of the property done anything to make it easy for you, the village, to take care of this parking issue that's been going on forever?
We recently, at the request in April, after a similar use was approved, the board directed staff to work with the property owner, come up with solutions to study the parking problem in a little bit more detail, and just determine what can we do to make the property more easily accessible on the parking basis. We worked with the petitioner to bring forth a plan to establish a PUD. It would allow the village to have a hand in dictating some of the parking requirements, but it would also allow the property owner to bring their own ideas that would be specific to their property without having to rezone the entire B1 business district. That petition has ultimately been withdrawn from the Planning Commission, so it's not under further consideration. And at this time, we have no reason to suspect that it will be coming forward again. So the answer is no.
So really, and the only way to get this taken care of, since the owner of the property has made no effort to work with the village in any way, shape, or form, makes it really simple. Follow the Planning Commission's decision, and deny and let the tenants of the property go back to the owner of the property and force him to come in here and work with us.
In that case, Evan, what's in it for the property owner?
to allow this, or in any capacity?
To come back to us or ask for more parking? What's in it for him? Yeah.
Well, I'll back up a little bit. So currently, County Line Square is fully tenanted. Beat Your Dogs came before the board a month ago. That was the last vacancy that was currently open at County Line Square. So at this point, it's 100% tenanted. So there's not a lot of leverage we have at present to actually get him back to the table to say, okay, in the future, we won't let these tenants come in if they need any variations of any kind. But at the same time, the only thing that I can really address is that the incentive would be to make sure that he is making a good faith effort to ensure that it's in the good graces of the village, honestly.
And pardon me for not knowing the legal leasing terms on this, but the lease is a fixed rate. It's not contingent upon receipts or sales of the property, correct?
I don't know how Bob does his exact leasing. In some cases, there is a percentage of revenues. Not always, though. So it just depends really on the tenant. I would suspect because he has a lot of smaller tenants, they're probably more fixed. But that would just be my surmising.
Thank you.
Do you have some pictures to show us some of the parking issues?
So these have been taken at various times throughout the year. This is at no particular point in the property. I think they're mostly taken at night. These are just examples of cars that are being parked at the property right now outside of a space. We've got one against the curb here, one in a striped area. There are several examples of this throughout the slideshow. So these are kind of all the same. I think this is a valet sticker.
Valet's parking there?
I believe so, yeah. I don't know the exact spot on that one. Again, this is at another point in the, looks to be cars either going into Capri or something, or Capri Express. No, I'm not suggesting it is Capri. It's just another part of the property.
Yes.
Oh, shoot.
So yeah, so we do see some challenges in terms of quantity of parking at some point.
Thank you. Any other questions, Bevan?
What would be the legal basis for allowing a parking variance, right? Because variances can be granted, but aren't there usually some legal requirements for a variance?
Findings of fact are the legal basis for all really special uses, variations, text amendments, things like that. The variances generally run with the idea that, let me back up. Variances run with the land, instead of special uses running with the property, or the use, I should say. So the legal basis of the variance would be that you would accept the findings of fact, which say that there will be no disruption of development in the area. It will not cause some issue with the neighboring properties at hand here. Basically, will you do any harm to your neighbor, whoever that happens to be, whether it's a shared tenancy like at Capri and their neighbors, the doctor's right there, or if it was your home and you're inconveniencing a neighbor to your east or west. So those are the basic legal, if you want to elaborate, please.
Yeah. The findings of fact for variation require that there be something unique about the property, the physical condition of the property, which that physical condition creates difficulty or hardship for the property to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. The typical example people use for variation is a residential lot with a stream running through the middle of it, and you can't build a normal house on that property because of this stream. That's a physical condition to the property. If you don't grant a variation, they can't use the property. And so therefore you have to grant a variation. So that is the standard for a zoning variation.
What's your model?
And so my understanding is that it's not a problem per se with the property, it's a problem with the property owner that's unwilling to make the changes to conform the parking spaces, to add more spaces, more like it's between the private parties. It's not that you couldn't have these spaces there, it's that it's not being done. Is that correct?
I would certainly just want to note for the record that we have at least looked at the property with the property owner several times, and there are not abundant opportunities to add significant numbers of spaces. There aren't 40, 50, 75 spaces that just they're sitting there in the grass waiting to be plowed over. The property is fairly full in terms of its potential, but at the same time, more to your point, certainly we've been given the message that even if they were available, it's not necessarily a pursuit that the property owner is willing to undertake at this time to find any spaces.
Or other options.
Or other options,
Trustee
yes.
Model, I think your question gets to the reason why the 4 plan commissioners voted to deny it. And I hate to put him on the spot, but there's a reason we have a plan commission representative at these meetings, and Commissioner Stratus is here. He may be able to better answer the rationale, the findings that the plan commission made.
Good evening. In brief, I think you speak for the Planning Commission, the majority of the Planning Commission, in that we're very sympathetic. Capri's been a great corporate citizen. Our appreciation to them is demonstrated by the fact that we've given them multiple variances in the past 5 years. So I don't think anybody can say the village hasn't been supportive of cooperative. But in this case, giving them the special use was not problematic, but giving them the variance, the legal word we're all afraid to say is a hardship. What's the hardship here, and what's the hardship that wasn't self-imposed? We just didn't feel like just because they want 3 more spaces is reason to give it. I think we had a great debate on this. It was over an hour. We were frustrated with the property owner. Staff is being very diplomatic in how they respond to him, but he has been a terrible corporate citizen, where Capri has been a good corporate citizen. The developer for the property didn't show up at the hearing. That's not a mistake, and that's not an error. He doesn't want to be confronted. We confront him all the time, and there are things he can do. There are suggestions that we make, and he chooses not to do them. Unfortunately, the applicants then caught the crosshairs, as his counsel expressed to us. And again, we're all extremely sympathetic. But again, so I think the one issue was the inability to prove the hardship. And the second issue, we see this often, is the precedential value of granting it. So if we said, okay, it's okay, we're gonna look away again, even though you're 51 stalls short, what's to keep Dow from coming up and saying, okay, we want 24 seats, and we need a variance for 5 more stalls. And then Kirsten's Bakery, I mean, at what point does it become silly? So I think that was the issue. We all struggled with it because, again, the applicant is a great corporate citizen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to ask the petitioner's attorney to come up and give us a little
informal agreement,
a little history.
Little flavor.
Well, I was going to ask Evan for some history, but he hasn't been here long enough. No.
So thank you, Mayor.
But
for the record, Gary Grasso, counsel to Capri. The owners are here, Mr. and Mrs. Revito. I'm also a resident and a frequent patron of Capri. We always say that Burr Ridge is a very special place. There are many reasons for that, but certainly I think you'd all agree that one of the reasons Burr Ridge is a very special place is because of Capri. We all can remember, many of us can probably remember prior to 2005, how unsuccessful that area, that restaurant area was. There were at least 2 that I can remember that opened there and failed, and GE with his magic has turned it into one of the jewels of the village, and as Mike says, one of the good corporate citizens since 2005. And yes, he has asked for and received variations because it's been warranted. Just in a little rebuttal to Mr. Stratus on the hardship. The hardship is, in fact, it's there. He needs 3 spaces. The special use has been approved or recommended to be approved. And the hardship arises from the special use because, in fact, the ordinance requires, the ordinance requires 3 more spaces. Is there, in fact, a parking problem? We did, we asked the commission at the time have there been any real problems recently with any of the parking? And we asked the police department to, and there have been no real problems. And it's also my understanding, and maybe something that the village, and I'll be the last person, and you know I have some considerable history with this village also, I'd be the last person to stand here and defend Bob Garber and his lack of cooperation with the village. And in fact, I'll go so far as to say, with the building of the village center and many of the other things that this community has done in the last decade or more, we have increased the value of Mr. Garber's property to the extent that you would think that he would try to be a better corporate property owner. But he is who he is. But at the same time, if you looked at a more traditional formula to compute parking, my understanding, and then I'll let the pros tell me, I don't know, Evan or Doug, but if you did a more traditional way, you're in the business a bit, Tony, of square footage, then in fact Garber might be under the necessary parking requirements. I believe the numbers that I wrote down were 483, and he's got under the current situation, he has 432, and he's 51 short. But if he did a different computation and maybe a text amendment, he in fact wouldn't, he'd be in compliance. We wouldn't be standing here asking for a variation. So, so just to get back to the point, I've strayed a bit, and then I'll answer your question, Mayor, or anybody else's. The hardship is, in fact, we need 3 more spaces. And it gets as absurd as if we found 3 more spaces, for example, over by Patty's or behind Patty's, and we could stripe 3 more spaces, we would meet the requirement. Am I correct, Doug?
That's correct.
So it isn't that you need 3 more spaces in front. You need 3 more spaces somewhere in that whole subdivision, and you're in compliance. So it gets a little absurd. So that proves the point even more that the hardship is, in fact, it exists. We need 3 spaces. People are okay with the plan. This would be seasonal, by the way. It's obviously not going to be,
good point.
and, you know, after next month. There won't be any need for that until May, if we're lucky, here. So it really is kind of a 6-month issue that we're trying to address. And so it is, in fact, 3 spaces that we're asking you to give us and to overrule, if you will, or not accept a recommendation to deny the variance, because it, in fact, exists.
And you say it in fact exists. You mentioned that it's already been used like that. How long has it already been used like this for eating and dining outside?
It really hasn't. I think maybe there's been some, and you could see it, but Gigi wants to formalize it, put in the required railings, and then have full service eating outside. He has used it for cocktails and things like that in the past, but this would actually be also to serve food. And it has been going on to some extent on and off, and that is not a basis. I don't think that that's a legitimate basis to say, well, it's been going on and there isn't a problem, therefore that's a reason to grant the variance. I don't think that's the proper formula. The proper formula is, do we in fact need 3 spaces? And under the ordinance, 280 square feet, yes, we need 3 more spaces. Is there an actual parking problem? I think the answer to that is no. Between the valet and the use of pace and the fact that the concentrated hours are really only sometimes 5:30 to 8:30, mainly Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, there really hasn't been a problem. And so we respectfully ask you to reconsider the Plan Commission's denial.
Questions of?
Yes, Mr. Grosso, thank you. And I echo the comments about Capri that were made by you and the other folks here. I totally appreciate them, and I also respect the position they're in, the difficult position with their landlord. However, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, so I'm a little over my head here, but sometimes I do play one on TV, though. And anyway, this is a volitional act, though, isn't it? I don't buy the hardship argument because they are choosing to add more tables. It is their choice to add this and to request for this. So as a result, they need 3 more spaces. I don't buy the hardship argument because they can choose not to add the additional tables, I think. What do you say about that?
Well, the special use was approved in that it works. There's enough space. It can be aesthetically done, consistent with the village ordinance. It will bring more tax dollars to the village. There's a supply and demand situation because residents of Burr Ridge and those that come to Burr Ridge to dine want to use these areas. They are popular in the summer months. So volition, yes, it's part of the business. It's part of what we want to do is increase business, just as if any of the other businesses wanted to have more seating either inside or out, because good problem, right? People are coming to Burr Ridge. So in that sense, it's volition, but it's also part of what you want to do to promote the growth of business in Burr Ridge. One of the questions that Mike and I, exchanges that we had last Monday, was that, well, if you're now drawing the line, and I took the position at the time that you're, quote, penalizing the tenants because of what Garber isn't willing to do. Maybe penalizing is too harsh a term. But in fact, if you say no to Capri for this, you are in fact drawing the line with Garber and saying he can't do anything more. He can't expand any of the other places, the Wine Merchant, La Cabanita, you pick it, Patty's, any Kirsten's, any other place, because to do so would necessarily require more parking. And therefore, if you're going to say no because of Garber, then you have to say no because of Garber consistently. And I don't think that that is the standard for this board to deny or grant a variance that they can't get along with what they want done by the owner. So I don't know if somebody else asked about the lease. Well, Gigi has a lease. He's got a lease for multiple years. I happen to know. I helped him with the lease. Garber's not going to get any more money or lose any more money. And as I think Evan just told you, the place is now 100% leased, and Garber's got his money coming in. So I don't know how you can. I think you judge the variance based on whether or not you want to increase business here, and is there really a problem, and why not allow it? And when and if a county line merchant or anybody else comes in and asks for something, then you judge his or her petition at that time. But to deny it because we're all unhappy, to use a word, with Garber, is that the right standard? Is that the right way to govern the village? I could probably take some issue with that, but of course you guys get paid the big bucks and you'll make the decision. So on its merits, I believe that this meets all the requirements of a variance, and it is a good corporate citizen who has responded well when given other variances, and the chief is here, and I don't believe there's any real parking issue. It's more of an academic one at this point, and therefore how you deal with Garber over time, I don't know, or maybe a text amendment is the appropriate way, but we're here on behalf of Capri for this variance tonight, and I think that it meets the requirements, and we respectfully ask you to grant it.
Trustee Pereza?
I understand that there is some kind of arrangement with the pay spaces in the behind the restaurant. Now, when we see this mess of all those cars parked and blocking each other up, was that because valet was sort of lazy, or was the pay slot filled up already too?
Well, I didn't get a full appreciation for the pictures, and some of them were not in the Capri area, and I don't know what time of day, or if it was. I doubt it was. I mean, I don't know. Obviously I know the valet business a little bit over there, but I don't. The valet people, as far as I understand it, would not be should not be parking it in. For example, there was one space there that was all yellow lined. That looked like someone just decided to park there. Some people, as you well know, they just pull their car up and park and lock it and walk into either a business or one of the restaurants. We can't, that's part of the policing challenge that we do a very good job of, but that's part of the policing challenge. But to answer your question, back in 2015, when Gigi was here for a variance, he did make an arrangement with Pace to park employees' cars in the Pace lot and to use that as overflow for the valet. I understand that often is used because it isn't used at night, and so that has, between the valet and the arrangement with Pace, we haven't had any real parking problems as far as I know since that was put together in 2015.
Now, using the Pace lot, you're still three parking spaces short?
Because and again, Doug will correct me, but you cannot, that's not part of the village, it's not part of the center, and so we can't say we've got use there. It'd be the same thing as TCF Bank, trying to make an arrangement with TCF Bank, trying to use spaces over there that could be used for parking or valet, if TCF would ever allow that. We tried that years ago, and their corporate structure, of course, understanding insurance and things like that, didn't allow it. So you can't do that. You have to find the 3 spaces within Garber's lot. And some of it is, Gigi came to the Plan Commission, there is a tape, people in the morning, they park there, and they go over, and they're apparently employees, and they work in the village center. Some people park there, and then they walk to the Pace bus, and they take the Pace bus. So there are people, using that that aren't even using the restaurants or any of the other businesses in Garber Center. That becomes a policing issue. And I'm not suggesting that it isn't being appropriately policed. You can't just have a squad car down there all day long and give tickets. But that is that's part of the issue too. But there really isn't a parking problem. It is the ordinance need to get 3 spaces for which we asked for the variation.
Success is a nice problem to have, and obviously have parking issues. I'm sorry, Trustee Perez, do you have anything else for?
I was just thinking, if you have valet there during your busy time, and the valet has access to the Pace lot, I just can't see why the 3 parking spots is a big problem.
As a fact, it is not. As a requirement, we need your approval.
If they didn't have valet parking, I could understand it, but I know they have the valet parking.
And that all weighs into the vote, because the reality is they can use that, and if parking became that much of an issue, they can add a second. I mean, it's 3 days a week, 6 months out of the year. If need be, another valet on a couple of nights would be helpful to get them over to there. I'm sure it could be worked out. Trustee Model?
I'm curious, you mentioned about a calculation error, about a parking calculation error. What were you referring to there?
Well,
A different formula.
A different formula. It's my understanding that more traditional computations are, square footage under roof. If you did square footage under roof times the amount of spaces that are there, I talked to Evan a little bit about it, then Garber would actually have more than enough spaces. But that isn't how the village developed its parking formulas going way back. It has a separate formula for restaurants. Does it really make sense that just because there's 280 square feet that you need 3 more spaces, and it doesn't matter how many tables and chairs there are there? To your point about Arrowhead Farm and things, you wonder why some things were done in the past, but you weren't there and I wasn't there. So some of the formulas are different for not every tenant, but some tenants. Restaurants have a different formula than maybe a doctor's office or the dance studio or something else. But if you did it on a more traditional basis of square footage under roof, I'm told that there'd be more than enough spaces based on what Garber has now.
Any other questions of?
Mr. Grasso, your thought of there's sufficient parking in that situation is unbelievable. That's all I can say. both have difference of opinions. The pictures where you were kindly enough said you weren't sure which side they were. Some of them were for Capri, design, parking wherever they want. I love Gigi and his food. Fabulous, great corp, but at the end of the day, the place is a zoo in that corner. It's overparked. There's no way, unless you're gonna cut the spaces in half, and then how are you gonna park a car? So it's 51 spaces. We had Evan up here with the village to come up here, walk through it. The owner of the property makes no effort. And if anything, being a past mayor and with your skills as an attorney, talking with Mr. Garber, you probably is the best opportunity to get him to come in and work something out with us so that would benefit Capri. But otherwise, you know, our hands are kind of tied. You talk about being able to police. We're not able to police because there's no signs to ticket those individuals. So therefore causing another, that one particular picture of the two automobiles, there was no way for even almost a squad car, or if they had a police truck in there was no way moving around. Could you even get it there? So while I really appreciate the situation for Gigi and Capri, and I think it's terrific, but you know, I just don't see how this parking issue is not gonna be resolved.
Well, Trustee Snyder, there really isn't you could show a picture or two, and I can show you pictures probably when there are available spaces, right?
Right.
So for you to jump on one or two pictures, you know, I get it, but what is the practical effect of this? Your police department's not telling you that it is a problem. The other thing that you're assuming is that if I were to sit down with Garber, you were to sit down with Garber, Mickey was to sit down with Garber, that you could configure something at that end of the parking lot that's going to work and give you magically 3 or 4 or 10 different spaces. Again, not to defend Garber, but he did take out a couple of things at that end to increase, and he had a few parking spaces. Doug, you can help me if I've got that fact wrong or what it is, but in the last few years, he's done that. So there isn't anything more
on that side
that I can tell as a layperson that he can do at that side. But if he were to go to Patty's end and somehow reconfigure and add 3 spaces, then I don't need your permission. I mean, with all due respect. Because then there would be 3 more spaces. And that's another absurd result, right? Because it's not going to change anything. People are not going to park over at Patty's. Another thing is to have Garber put up his own valet business over at the other end for the restaurants, at, you know, for the Fred Astaire, for Dow, for County Line Merchant, for La Cavani. Have a valet over there and park the cars on the western side. Right. But we can't make him do that either. That would certainly alleviate the situation also. But what you have here is no real parking problem. You can see a picture or two and say, well, that's wrong, and that should be ticketed, okay? But the police do a pretty darn good job.
You can't ticket, Mr. Grasso.
Well, they can ticket, I think maybe there requires a different signage that has to be put up, which I believe the village is in the process of doing, requiring him to put up the proper signs, which will then allow the village to ticket, that's my understanding, so you could ticket, okay? And again, some of that is the village is fixing that right now. So you can ticket, and there really hasn't been a problem in parking there. So, and you have the demand, and you have people that want to use it, and there's a tax benefit to the village. So the variance appears to be a hardship, and it appears to make sense for business in the village, and there is no real parking problem at that end even. And then maybe the village sits around and decides whether or not it wants to recompute how it calculates parking, and there might not be a legal problem at all, but that's for another day. I'm here for Capri.
I think Burridge has a good problem, that we're growing, and we've grown from a small village, and I think Capri is a fabulous restaurant and is very well attended, and it is very busy over there, but I think we should look at our neighbors in Oak Brook and Hinsdale. They don't have issues like that. If you go to Maggiano's and that area, which is very high traffic, but there are valets running around, there are parking spots, but no one's double parked at any time. And I think, I mean, there is an issue which we've all seen, but we just have to find a way to fix that. And maybe having valet service would solve the problem.
But in a way, Gary, it's your fault. because the village center didn't get built,
Right.
which you and previous trustees and planning commissioners were all responsible for, you know. That didn't get built, County Line Square wouldn't be as popular.
Right.
Okay, so it's all your fault, just so you know.
Yeah, no good deed goes unpunished, but the Village Center was a project, of course, of the hours and efforts of many people.
Yes.
Planning commissioners, village trustees, volunteers, residents who came in, many late-night meetings.
Staff, I know,
it's
I didn't
been a
mean
real
to
jewel.
not include everybody else, but I was just trying to make a point. Okay, is there anything new that we want to discuss?
Yeah, I want to ask, do your clients have any legal recourse, in your opinion, with their landlord? I mean, again, this seems like a private thing. Could they not sue? Can they not, you know, if I
Well,
was
you can
Mr.
sue, this is America.
Yeah,
So-
right, and if I'm Mr. Garber, it's a lot cheaper to stripe 3 parking spaces
And
than
I'm
to
a
fight you in a
litigator.
lawsuit.
They can't win. Okay? And is it worth having that kind of marriage problem, you know, with your landlord? Probably not a good decision. But that is not the position that you should want to put the tenants in at all. You know, how you deal with that, if you feel you really need to deal with it, is, again, something that shouldn't hold up this process and shouldn't hold up the tenants from expanding their businesses and bringing more revenue into Burr Ridge.
Thank you. And, yes. Only one thing I'd like to point out, though, that the owner of Capri is also a Burr Ridge resident now, so that's.
Yes, that's true. Mr. and
Just
Mrs.
another
Robito
little, you know,
have a home in Burr Ridge.
so.
Now they need a little
One of the
Bambino.
things, one of the things I've noticed is, and I think part of the problem might be that the valet helps this problem is when they take the car, they section a bunch off real close. Instead of starting and filling up the pay slot, they fill up the existing parking space and they make it, because I remember one time, the place was full and I was driving home back home and there wasn't a car in the space lot.
Well, that's certainly something that we can address with the valet, and it's certainly something that you can make, you can put any conditions you want on anything, and we can redo that and look at that and make sure it's being done. I believe the current variance requires that there be valet almost every night there.
Yes, every night.
And that it use the pace lot. If you want to, if you will, make sure Gigi enforces that with the valet more, I'm sure that's an easier fix than denying him the variance under these circumstances.
Mr. Francis?
Yes, thank you. So first and foremost, I want to say that I'm going to talk about is not directed in any way towards Capri in a negative way. If I may quote something I heard several years back at a board meeting, former trustee and plan commissioner chairman Bob Grella called Capri the jewel of the village. I would agree with him thoroughly on that. I'm sure all of my fellow trustees would agree with that also. A few years ago, my wife and I wanted to go have a special evening to celebrate our 25th anniversary. We chose Capri. When my son turned 21, to celebrate his birthday, he chose Capri. My good friends, Ted and Denise, who live 10 miles south of Morris, Illinois, drive 60 miles to come to Capri several times a year. Okay? Capri is an excellent place for celebrations, for special events, and for everyday casual events. Let's go get a bite to eat or a cocktail. No doubt about it. Great citizens, great neighbors, and we certainly enjoy having them here in the village. We all want Capri to be successful. We also want the neighbors to be successful too, including Hen House, Cycle Bar, County Line Merchant, Beach for Dogs, Fred Astaire, and all the other tenants in the County Line Square. We want Capri to be successful, but not at the expense of the other tenants. With that being said, there is a parking problem at County Line Square. Not because of Capri, not because of Hen House, but because of the aggregate uses, the variety of uses, and the times that they're being used at County Line Square. It is the problem of the shopping center's owner, not of Gigi's, not of the other tenants. It's his problem. We all know that. We've all agree on that. But by continuing to grant variations for parking requirements as defined by the ordinance, all we are doing is kicking the can down the road and ignoring the problem. Our current ordinance requires that there be 483 parking spaces by ordinance. Now, we can argue over the different kind of formulas. There's all kinds of number of tables, number of chairs, number of square feet, number of this and that, all different formulas to calculate the parking demands based on use. This is what we've chosen in this village, and this is what we all stand by. This is what all the corporate citizens will abide by. So, right or wrong, that's what is what it is. There are 432 available, but that 432 does not take into account the 6 parking spaces that are taken away by Brookhaven for their cart pens. So really, there's only 426 spaces available because you can't put a car where the shopping carts are. So we are really short 57 spaces, not 51. So I have a couple of questions of the chief, if you have a minute, Chief. What are you and are you not able to enforce as far as parking violations in County Line Square?
Without an agreement, we can only enforce handicap parking. With an agreement, we can only enforce parking that has the proper signage in the fire lane.
So proper signage would include no parking fire lane?
Correct.
And how long has that agreement been in place?
Well, we just renewed the agreement, so it was 20 years ago. We had
It expired and then we just renewed it.
expired
Okay.
and we just renewed it.
Okay. Anything else you can enforce? Can you enforce parking in aisles or out in striped areas or?
If we have the proper signage, we can
Okay.
enforce it.
Understood. Okay, very good. Thank you. Could you pull up the pictures again, Doug, please? We kind of went over those real quick, but I want to go over them in detail. This picture was taken last Friday evening at 7 p.m. Okay. Next picture, please. 7 p.m. again. Now here's 2 cars parked in striped areas. Let's zoom in on the blue car in the next picture. Next picture. This is parked by the valet service. So the valet service is parking cars in the striped areas, causing a parking problem. Next picture, Doug. So this is not Capri. This is Capri Express Subway and whoever else is down over there. When there is no parking available for customers to pick up their to-go orders or to place an order or drop somebody off, they park in the fire lane. I drove up and down the aisleways. There was no parking available. The parking lot was full, and they were double parked, and so these people chose to park in the fire lane. I went in, this is about 7 o'clock last Friday evening. I went to Brookhaven to get my groceries, and the next picture, 20 minutes later, 3 different cars doing the same thing. Now there's staging spots adjacent to this area here for staging for Capri Express drivers, staging for Dow pickup to-go orders and such, but those are full, those are parked. There's cars parked in there constantly. So there's a parking problem, okay? They're parked in the fire lane, all right? And they park in the fire lane in front of Capri, and they park in the fire lane in front of Brookhaven, and they park in the fire lane in front of the school, Kuman, and so on. So, I think that's all the pictures that I had. Last Friday night at 7 p.m. After the commuters had left the Pace lot, I drove into the Pace lot. Last Friday night, 4 cars in the Pace lot. It's not being used by the employees. It's not being used by Capri Valet. If I recall, the agreement between Capri and Pace is that, and part of the ordinance that was granted in 2015 is that the employees were to use the Pace lot. Only 4 cars there. Now I know Gigi has more than 4 employees. So let's get the employees to park back there. I don't know where they're parking. Let's get them to park in the Pace lot. Let's get the valet to park back there as well. I went by there Saturday night. It was Friday night, maybe somebody was working late or maybe some concert goer was parked in the Pace lot Friday night. Saturday night, 2 cars in the lot, 7 o'clock, a busy time, okay? So, let's face it, by denying this variation, it's forcing the petitioner to work with the landowner and put their relationship at a disadvantage. It's this 3 extra spaces that we're not going to come out of the woodwork. Staff has worked time and time again to try and find additional spaces, sharpened their pencils numerous times on numerous occasions, and can't come up with any more. There's just no more. It's done. We added 6 more spaces in 2015 when they took out some parking islands and landscape islands and did some restriping and reconfiguration. 6 more spaces squeezed out in 2015 when Gigi came before us that last time. We can't get any more. So we have to take some other steps. I don't want to punish Gigi. He's got a good problem. So I'm gonna suggest this. So after 5 p.m., when the first 40 valet customers that come to the restaurant, because not everybody valets, some people park and walk. The first 40 valet customers, those valet customers' cars are taken to the pay slot, just like at Topaz. Those customers are wheeled off-site down on McCormick Drive. I would also suggest that additional valet employees be added so that valet parking is more efficient and occurs more swift, so that cars aren't stacking up in the fire lane, and then you can't get by. Someone who wants to make the circle around, they can't get by because the cars are blocking, parked on both sides waiting for valet. There's only one guy there. He's running back and forth, working his butt off. I've seen him. He's a great asset. And also Capri employees need to be reminded to park in the pay slot, first and foremost, at 5:30 p.m. as per the agreement. So those are my suggestions. So, in addition, the shopping mall owner is required to have 8 no parking fire lane signs, okay? In 2015, when Cycle Bar came before us, he was down to 2. So he was asked to put in 6 more. I did a count on Friday. There's 6. 2 disappeared again. They keep disappearing. I don't think there's any police reports on these missing signs. We need to have those signs installed again. And the appropriate signage that staff is working with to have the ability to enforce the parking problems that exist. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And let me just make one comment about the pictures taken at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, in the last couple of Friday nights. There's another reason that Burr Ridge is a very special place, and that's because Friday nights at 7 o'clock, there's 2,000 people over at the concert. Guess where a lot of them go and park? And so while I appreciate 7 o'clock on a Friday night, which is an acute situation, but especially on a Friday night, on a concert night, you would expect every parking lot to be overused. So I don't know that that's the best example. It certainly is an example. But I certainly appreciate that Trustee Francis has come up with some good suggestions, and not only good suggestions, but things that should be going on anyhow. The valet should be using the pay slot because that's in the agreement. As to the additional valet, that'll be an economic decision that Gigi will have to make. But certainly the parking over at Pace would tend to alleviate that. And if that is part of, if I'm hearing, if that is part of what it would take to get the variance, obviously Gigi's willing to do what he needs to do to get the variance. So I appreciate constructive suggestions like that.
Trustee Francis?
I had pictures from Friday and Saturday night. I chose the Friday night pictures because, yes, there's concerts going on. I know that. But Friday night, if you recall, was rainy and drizzly. So I'm sure that the concert attendance was way down as compared to what it normally is. And I know that. They park over there in the square, and the signs have been put up about parking for County Line Square patrons only. Violators will be towed, and those signs need to be modified, I'm told.
Right.
But whatever. Staff is working with the property owner to do that. But Friday night was rainy and drizzly, so I don't believe it was due to the concerts that it was overparked, because those same parking conditions existed on Saturday night as well, with the double parking on Striped and parking on the fire lane and such. So.
Right. There is a concert on Friday nights.
And well, good, bad, or indifferent. That was our last concert of the year, and with Chicago Experience, I don't know, I wasn't there, but I imagine they had a pretty decent crowd.
I don't know.
Pardon me?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I
It's
was
just a
there.
point.
It wasn't the same as the previous one. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good stuff. But good suggestions. I've always felt that on a Friday night, especially, that another valet guy would be helpful, because mine only runs so far and so fast to get those cars out of there. There's Trustee Pheasant.
Wow.
Anything new?
No, just to rehash what I said is very similar to what Trustee Francis said. I've seen the parking lot full, pay slot empty on my way home. And I think we're not arguing, but talking about 3 parking spaces. What is there, 24, 28 spots in the space slot? So if you know, they start in.
A lot more, I think.
A lot more.
Lot more?
Oh, yeah.
So if the valet starts there, as soon as it fills that up and then comes in, I'll bet you we have nowhere near the parking problem we have. And I think that would be the way to go, is that when people valet, they shoot them right to the pay slot first. I've seen them come right around and park right in the same lot. Well, as some of those pictures showed, you can see the stub, you know, a few feet away. They're just too lazy to do their job. And I would say that would be the only way that I would consider easing up on it.
Schiappa?
So I echo Trustee Franzisi's comments. I'm a patron of Capri. Actually, Gigi's a neighbor of mine. So I very much enjoy going there. I do bring friends from as far south as Orland, as far west as Downers Grove and Willowbrook, and I enjoy going there. And when I talk to friends and tell them I'm from Burr Ridge, they ask, do you know Capri? And I said, yeah, I do know Capri. So I think, in listening to the Mike Stratus from the Planning Commission, we've given them a lot of variations, and we've been good to them because they have been a good corporate citizen with the Village of Burr Ridge. And I don't think now is the time to penalize a good corporate citizen like Capri, who's been very responsible, and it just really adds to our village and being a very special place. And I think by penalizing him for the property owners' insubordination is not fair. And I think by utilizing those suggestions that Trustee Franzese had put together, I swung by there earlier today, and I think the ordinance provides that valet can have 4 holding spots, and I think he had 5. So, you know, some of those little tweaks that we can make to ensure that we maximize parking. And going to parking, I think we have a combination of a parking/walking problem. I'm there 3 to 4 times a week, so is my wife. We go to all the stores there, and I have an easier time finding a spot at County Line Square than I do in front of Starbucks. If I find a spot in front of Starbucks, I want to go buy a lottery ticket because there are never any spots in front of that store. But I can find a spot at County Line Square, and usually when I go to Capri, I just have it valeted. But going to, I go to Cycle Bar, Brookhaven, and everyone knows I love Kirsten's, and I'm always there. I can find a spot somewhere to put my car and take a walk, or I valet it. So I'm in support of helping Gigi grow. I think it's a great establishment. It is a jewel in our village, and I would like to make a motion to amend the conditions of a prior special use approval for outdoor dining, and to approve the variation for the expansion of existing restaurant without the required number of parking spaces.
Okay. There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Are there any other conditions on the motion, such as?
I'll add conditions that, can we repeat how many conditions did you have?
I had 3 suggestions.
3 suggestions, okay. To strongly urge the petitioner.
So that after 5 p.m., that the valet service would begin parking cars in the pay slot first, up to 40 cars. That additional valet employees, at least one more, there's one there currently, at least one more, would be employed such that the valet service would be able to park cars efficiently and swiftly so as not to inconvenience guests or other patrons of other customers of other businesses there and not to stack cars up in the fire lane. And third, to ensure that the Capri employees themselves are parking in the pay slot as per the previous agreement. Those are the suggestions.
With those suggestions
I'll agree with that.
in motion.
Okay, are you seconding it?
With the addition he made. Right?
With the suggestions turned in the conditions. Now they say first 40, I don't know how hard and fast that can be, because if some nights it's not gonna fill up, so you don't wanna run over there. Maybe on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
I mean, it's common sense, you know, if you got a bad night, you got open parking spaces, you don't have to fill it up. But I know for myself, on the weekends, you're almost always full, they've gotta fill it up. Or they've got to go to the
Thursday,
pay
Friday,
slot
Saturday is
first.
fine.
I mean, it's common sense. If they do that, I don't have a problem. But if they start slacking off again, we'll be back here.
To fully utilize the pay slot.
Yeah.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is to utilize the pay slot first,
Right.
okay?
Yeah,
And then to make sure the employees are in fact also using the pay slot. And then to make an arrangement so that maybe on the busier nights, Friday and Saturday, for example, there'd be either extra help or some way in which the valet will have either extra help or can more swiftly handle the cars so that there is no stacking, which is not permitted anyhow.
Less stacking, because it's not gonna.
It's not permitted, but it occurs. And I specifically said more employees, not more swiftly, so they can operate more swiftly. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, I'm okay with these restricting these, having these conditions on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, because that's the busiest time. That's when the parking problems occur. That's what I've observed in my personal experience going to that mall there for over 29 years.
Excuse me, there's a, pardon me?
Is the board, I wanted to make a few comments on that if you're done.
Sure.
One on the condition regarding the valet parking. The ordinance right now states that overflow valet parking shall be in the pay slot.
Right.
We can't enforce that. We don't know what to enforce. So that language, I appreciate the suggestion. If there's a specific number, as whether it's 40 or 20 or 30, that makes it easy to enforce. We go over there, we see there's not 40 cars in the pay slot, we see they're not parking, the valet's not going over there, we have a violation. It's that simple. So whether, I don't, the number's up to you, but that would help us make it fairly easy to enforce if you set a specific number that the first X number of valet, or all the valet, whatever your preference, be in the pay slot.
And on that note, Gary, is there a number that you think would sound reasonable?
Yeah, and it just sounds 40 to me is not reasonable, okay? That'd be, I don't know that they get 40 cars a night to valet, frankly. No, right.
I don't know.
So, I think that you begin parking in the pay slot at the hour of 5 o'clock. And I'm just trying to shoot for a number, but what you're saying now is that you're not seeing it being really utilized much at all.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm saying that the way the condition is written now, I don't know how to enforce it. Our staff does not know how to enforce overflow, whether it's overflow or, I mean, if you just said between certain hours that all valet parking has to be in the pay slot, that would make it easy. Or if you said the first 20 or whatever, we just got to be able to go over there, see it visually, and know what to enforce.
It isn't the shortest distance, to get to the pay slot, to valet and then have people waiting. And therein lies another problem. I'm trying to stand here and try to work something out consistent with the spirit of what Trustee Francis is suggesting, and that is beginning at 5 o'clock to start using the Pace lot. And I just think that if they're not using it fully, and we're hearing, once the signage and everything, I think that's gonna be required to go up. And if the chief is then saying that they're gonna start ticketing cars because they're parking, as Joe pointed out, in areas they shouldn't be parking, that would indicate that Gigi's not living up to the deal to make sure enough cars are being parked in the Pace lot, but I don't know how you set a number. I just don't, as I stand here tonight.
What happens if Pace terminates?
Excuse me, there's no speaking from the residents unless they're actually at the microphone. Excuse me, no, you weren't on the list. I'm sorry. Please honor the rules of the boardroom.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you.
Welcome. This is not a free-for-all. It's not a town hall meeting. It's a board meeting.
A relevant one.
Keep it up, and I'll ask you to be removed.
So, by the way, we've had no issue with the agreement at all. It's a letter agreement, and it's been honored by Pace since 2015. So we'll use best efforts. I'm trying to figure out a way so that it can be enforced and it can be reported back to the board as to whether or not we're using the Pace lot efficiently and in the spirit of what Trustee Francis is suggesting. I just, standing here, I can't think of the number.
Trustee Francis, you have any suggestions?
I'll disagree with you on one point in that the Pace lot isn't being used. Because when I went by Friday night, I'll restate
No,
this
it isn't
again.
being used. I'm saying that it be used efficiently.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not suggesting it is.
All right, and then maybe I should, instead of saying 5 p.m., maybe it's 6 p.m. because the agreement doesn't, the agreement with Pace starts at 5:30 p.m., correct?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe 5:30 p.m. then, or 6 p.m. Something to take the pressure off of the parking in that area there on the west side of the mall, okay? And maybe 40, I threw a number out there. I don't know how many tables, I never did a count of how many tables are inside Capri. I know how many tables are outside right now, but not inside. And how many, standing room only in the bar. It's great, it's wonderful, but 40, maybe it's too many. 25, 30, I don't know. Let's agree on a number and let's move forward.
I'm just throwing a concept out, is the number the issue or is it the hours? So if you started parking and you're using the Pace lot at 6 o'clock and use it from 6 to, because the real pressure point, I think we'll all agree that go there, is that 5 to 7:30, you go in there at 8 o'clock and things are fine, but it is that 5, because everybody wants to eat early. It is that 5 to kind of 7:30 time period, I think, we agree on that. So maybe starting at 6 o'clock, that he starts using the Pace lot to alleviate any situation and use the Pace lot from 6 to 7. And you guys can, the chief can go by and send somebody by every now and then, and make sure there's cars in the lot, so that we can at least be policing it.
I think you use the Pace lot as long as your parking in front of the place is crowded. I mean, the common sense gotta work in somewhere. Rather than have special hours or stuff.
While you're maintaining the order, thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Grasso, and I appreciate the spirit of what you're saying, Trustee Schiappa, what we're trying to do, but this sounds like a really elaborate, complex, confusing workaround. You're gonna have trouble complying with it. How are we going to enforce it? And I'm personally stuck on the legal issues around the variance. I think that the plan commissioners made great points about why you would legally grant a variance, and I'm not hearing that right now. I'm stuck on that, and I respect the position that it's putting the restaurant owner in, but I think this needs to be worked out with the property owner, and I don't think we should be doing all these gyrations and acrobatics to make this accommodation here that's going to be very difficult. And what happens when the next place comes, and the next place comes and wants a variance? And are we going to have all these things for moving Dow's cars over to the lot and all this other stuff? I mean, I just think this is a can of worms, but I appreciate the spirit, and I appreciate this, but I don't think this is our problem to solve here. I think this needs to be worked out between the tenants and the property owner. I like to eat late, so 9 o'clock is perfect for me. I don't think everyone eats early. I'm a 9 o'clock diner, but I appreciate the comment.
Again, the hardship is that there is no other way to do this other than to get the variance. He has met the requirements of coming here and asking. The Plan Commission said that they're okay with the special use. The only way to get the special use is to get the variance. So to be consistent with the Plan Commission, the hardship in fact exists in fact, and that we can try to solve it, we're willing to do that and make the effort to do it, just like we did in 2015, which worked. And in fact, we're not using it the way we should be, and so when we do use it, there shouldn't be a problem. And in fact, while there are occasions when you go there and see people parked anywhere in the system, all we can do is come here as Capri and ask for this relief for Capri. When others come, they're going to have to come up with their solution. And maybe Garber at that point does something, if he can do anything. The assumption here is that he can reconfigure that lot, and I don't know that can be done. But I suppose that if the variance is not given, you're sending a message to everybody in that center that they can't do anything more to develop their business, because to do so would mean that they'd have to come to the Plan Commission, who would now be on record as saying they must deny any request for variance. And I don't think that's the way to run the village.
Thank you very much, Gary. There's been actually, you two guys probably know protocol better than I would. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Then I think that should remain at the board at this point. Trustee Francis, do you have any final questions or comments?
No, just echoing what the petitioner said, is that staff has looked at this parking site numerous times, trying to come up with additional ways to generate additional parking to take some of the pressure off the parking at the peak times. And restriping, reconfiguring, taking islands out, moving them around, that's already been done. They've squeezed every possible parking space out of that site. And unless we add the spaces behind Patty's, on the south side of Patty's, which does nothing to solve the problems in front of Capri Express or Capri or Dow, there's nothing else that can be done by the developer.
But technically...
But there are some ideas out that we've all talked about and floated around here that can take the pressure off with some additional valet service, some additional parking at the Pace lot, and reminding the employees, this is already part of the agreement, the existing agreement, reminding the employees that they are to park in the Pace lot. So.
Thank you.
Now, is there a motion out there or not?
And there's a second too. I believe you seconded it, as long as it was clarified.
No, I know, but we've been talking, I just want to make sure there's been no changes.
Is this a permanent variance that we would be granting, or is there a time period? Is it just this summer while you work out the problems, or no? Permanent.
Good. May I ask for clarification on the motion, specifically regarding the valet parking? Is it the first 40 valet parking must be in the Pace lot after 5:30 p.m. or otherwise?
The petitioner said they had a hard time coming up with a number, so 40 was a big number. I don't know. I mean, can we settle on 20?
And part of it's good faith. It's a...
Maybe between employees and then 10 cars.
No, that's not what I meant.
No, I'm saying employees and 20 cars.
Employees are required right now to park back there, and they're not. This is 20 additional valet cars, customers of Capri, or whatever number you choose in your motion, is what I was suggesting.
You got that now, Doug?
Well, it's up to the trustee making the motion. What is the condition? Is it the first 20?
20 cars.
After 5:30, the first 20 valet cars have to be in the 6 o'clock?
5:30, no?
When does Pace?
Pace is 5:30, but you have to get cleared out of there. So.
They were never given the opportunity to do
Oh,
Pace is 6 o'clock per the agreement.
So after 6 o'clock, first 20 valet cars that arrive
Right.
have to be in the pay slot. And then the other conditionals, a minimum of 2 valet employees, parkers, on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The first condition also applies to Thursday, Friday, and Saturday only. And that the condition that employees must park in the pay slot after 5:30.
Yeah, how can,
All employees have to park in a pay slot.
All employees have to park in the pay slot at any time?
Yes,
Well, they
anytime,
can't
all
park there during
employees.
the day,
After 5:30. The agreement is limited to 5:30 or later.
after
Oh,
5:30,
right.
every day of the week. Okay, so I think I understand that. The motion technically is to direct us to prepare an ordinance.
Okay.
And we'll do so based on those conditions. I would remind the board once again, as we always do when there's a negative plan commission vote, it takes 4 votes, 4 trustee votes to overturn that recommendation.
thank you, Doug.
And once again, as far as the number of valet parkers, is it the recommendation to have all 3 nights or just two of the 3 nights?
I believe it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
And then the question is the petitioner agreeable to that as a condition?
Yes.
Okay, so you're clear on the motion? There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Scalpa.
Yes.
Trustee Beza.
Yes.
Trustee Model.
No.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Matal.
No.
Trustee Snyder.
No.
Mayor Straub.
It fails. They need 4 votes, 4 trustee votes in order to overturn the planning commission. So it's a split vote. And so that's official, but so what's next for the petitioner?
Well,
Should they want to come back?
is there a motion?
I'll make another motion. I would make a motion to, if you're willing to hear, I would make a motion to grant the variance on the seating condition and deny the variance on the parking. So
Well, then he can't have it.
Then he can't have either one.
he needs to work it out with his landlord.
It ain't gonna happen. We've been trying for years to work.
Actually, you know what, I would say
Where is he
that.
gonna get the spots?
I am not the owner of the property, and neither are we. I don't know if this is, again, I defer to the legal issues that the plan commissioners identified, and it's not anything about the petitioner or about that I would love to do this, but I think I have a problem with this, that we are granting an improper variance. That's why I'm voting no on it, and that's why I voted no. So I would enable him to have his spots, but I don't know this catch-22, but it's not gonna be worked out here tonight, I don't think.
And if that was voted on, for point of clarification, and the owner of the property, Bob Garber, I have not spoken with him yet personally, but I would like to give that a shot. And so if this is approved as is, accepted as is, and he was able to get 3 extra parking spots, does this make it easier later for having the first part already voted on?
Sure, yeah, I mean, he would then be able to expand the outdoor dining if he
Yeah,
found
we
the
would
parking.
certainly want you, the petitioner would certainly want you to approve what the plan commission did approve, and that was a special use. As I said before, if we find 3 spaces that are behind patties, then we don't need your variance.
God bless. Yes.
That's what, and I'd like to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's a silly remedy.
It's a silly remedy that doesn't solve the parking problem.
Right, it doesn't. And what we're trying to do is solve the parking problem, and I appreciate your efforts.
I'll make the motion
Again,
to.
again, just for the record, I don't know how anybody can expand their business now in County Line Square because you've now set policy that says there cannot be a hardship. Because if they want to voluntarily expand their business, outdoors or anything, it's volition, and you've now said as a board that they can't do that. and I think that's bad business.
Well, and I sort of beg to differ on that, because it wouldn't be the first time a business outgrew its space. Not that that would change, that would not happen with Capri, because it wouldn't be the same somewhere else, but, you know,
Well, yes,
businesses outgrow a place and they end up moving.
So if someone wants to expand and therefore the parking, it becomes an issue, you can't give them the variance because they're creating the problem themselves by wanting to expand their business.
Point of order, there was a motion, right? Is there a second on the motion or not?
So is there are you motioning?
I'm making a motion to approve the special use to permit additional outdoor dining at Capri Restaurant.
Okay, and then what happens to the other half? Are you accepting, are you just approving their denial all simultaneously?
No, they recommended approval of the special use to permit outdoor dining. Yep.
Right, so I made a motion, and is no one seconding that, or are you making another motion? I mean, what?
Well, yeah, first you need to get that.
I made a motion that we approve the variance on the chairs, on the outdoor seating, and we do nothing on the variance on the parking. That was my motion.
Well, essentially to concur with the plan
Concur with the
commission
planning
and direct
commission,
staff to
exactly.
prepare ordinances
That
as
was my
such.
motion.
You made the motion, are you seconding that?
It's a motion to approve the special use.
Let's be clear, this is a motion to approve the special use for outdoor dining. And there's a second motion to approve the recommendation for denial of the additional the variation for the additional parking.
He's making it
And
one
I
motion.
seconded
It's one motion. I'm concurring with the planning commission's
I
recommendation.
seconded Guy's. Did someone second your motion?
Well, wait a second. No, I made a motion and then you all started talking. Point of order. I made a motion, you all started talking. Either there's a second or there's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a second on Zach's motion?
Second.
Thank you. Now we
And
can discuss the motion.
It's accept it as is, basically.
As is, as the plan commission
Okay, there's
recommended.
a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion that or are we finished?
Hold on.
Okay. All right, so may I have a roll call on this vote?
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
No.
Trustee Francis?
No.
Trustee Pavesa?
Let's make it interesting, no.
Now you're the tiebreaker.
Well, then
Yeah, you can vote on this because you're
Yeah.
concurring.
We're
with the
concurring
plan
with them.
I'm gonna concur. That's 4-3.
So it's a yes vote.
That's a yes vote.
Okay, so we have the special
Now we're-
use and we've been denied the variance.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
Now, it took us twice as long to discuss 3 parking spots than it did the whole public school bus question. Yes, Evan?
Yes,
I
good
have a
evening.
consideration 8C.
Yes. This is consideration 8C on your agenda tonight. This is a plan commission recommendation. It's 2 recommendations in one motion here. I'm sorry, one consideration. This is to approve the request for a special use for a PUD at 7950 Drew for an 8-unit subdivision, as well as a variation for a PUD on 8.87 acres instead of the required 40 acres at the same address. So this is a request by the petitioner. The petitioner owns the property at 7950 Drew Avenue. This is an area that is zoned R3 currently. This particular property currently has a wetland on the property. It's approximately 3.5 acres in size. This property is the wetland area, the northern portion, basically covering the northern 90% of the property. So really the entire buildable area is limited to the southern area of the property. The PUD was proposed initially as a 9-unit subdivision, but after we went through 3 considerations of this, 3 hearings of this, the Plan Commission, the petitioner revised it to 8 units. 8 units is what is allowed by standard zoning right now. As I said, it's zoned R3. So under standard zoning, they're allowed to put 8 20,000 square foot lots on the property. And at the same time, the petitioner thought that a PUD would allow for a more creative option on the property, something with a little bit more land control that is not currently offered under standard zoning. As you can see, we've got a road that's a little bit offset off of 80th Street. 80th Street, you can't see it on that map right here, but it's about here, bottom right-hand corner, so it's offset a little bit to the north. But the public benefit of the PUD, every PUD needs to have a public benefit regardless of how much variation they're requesting from the zoning ordinance. The public benefit in this case, as petitioned by the petitioner, is some additional stormwater capacity. So our engineers, as well as theirs, have estimated that they're providing about an extra 20% stormwater capacity than what is normally required by the subdivision ordinance. There's also some retaining of some natural areas in the property, such as trees, specifically on the southern property line. We've got a fairly large estate home to the south here, fairly notable resident living there, and he objected to having some trees destroyed on the southern end of his property, or not his property, but near his property line, I should say. And so the PUD, by moving some of the homes away from the southern property line, allows the petitioner to retain a lot of that natural area that otherwise would have to be clear-cut under standard zoning. So we get to keep some of our green space that we value here in Burr Ridge, or Tree City community. There is also simply the matter of village control on a PUD that the Plan Commission felt was favorable over a by right subdivision. In this case, as long as what PUD is in front of us, the village has a say in architectural control. We're allowed to dictate what types of homes are built on the property, elevations, materials, things of that nature. So we get a say in what actually gets built beyond what is actually getting developed land-wise. As stated, there is a request here for not only a PUD, but as well a variation from the standard zoning for a PUD. In the R3 subdivision, it is required that you have 40-acre minimums, but the petitioner asked for a variation to build a PUD on 8.87 acres. The Plan Commission, again, recommended in favor of both of these items. We did have significant public comment at each of our 3 meetings. I see some of our residents here this evening that have participated in previous meeting minutes. The question's really on the question of flooding. If anyone lives in this area or has been down 79th Street at this intersection after a heavy rainfall, you know it's inaccessible to get through. Trustee Model is smiling, living just down the street. But this wetland is really a very tough and challenging issue for the village and has been for a number of years. So when it does rain, we see quite a bit of flooding in this area. And so there was a question of how the flooding would be exactly solved. The petitioner stated that the additional capacity for the stormwater would be a public benefit that would be realized. The way the public benefit would work is that the site that is buildable is uphill from the wetland. And so when it rains, all the water rolls uncontrolled down the hill into the wetland, thus filling it up at a fast rate. The way the engineering would work is it would retain all the water, and it would retain additional water and release it at a slower rate than what we required. So would relieve some of the pressure on that wetland without storing the water in the wetland per se. The water would eventually make its way downhill. We have to control the water the way it naturally flows, but at the same time there would be some control that does not exist presently. So that is one of the primary public benefits offered as part of the PUD according to the petition's plans. There was also some question of the Plan Commission regarding how the process actually comes together on the plan in terms of who actually is responsible for engineering this specific site. I reviewed with the petitioner, and we've determined that it has to actually go through 12 different governing bodies to be approved based on the wetland being present. 2 of those being the village, the Plan Commission being one and the village board being another. So there has to go through county approvals, we have to go through some Army Corps of Engineer approvals, we have state approvals that we have to go through. So normally we don't see quite this many levels of government involved. Just to remind you how many we have operating in Illinois, specifically on this property, but they do need to get 12 different levels of approval to actually put shovels in the ground and build homes on this property. So lots to go after this. This represents a preliminary plat of approval. At this stage, it's really just consideration of lot lines at this point and a very, very general plan. So a lot of public comment was received on this. Again, I see some of the residents who participated in that hearing tonight, but I can certainly say that the Plan Commission thoroughly thought this one out. There was a lot of time spent on this, and we're happy to deliver a recommendation for your consideration. If there are any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Doug, can you add any more history to this as to the zoning, what it's approved for, what the first option was, what the second option is?
Sure. The zoning of the property is R3, single-family residential. The R3 district requires minimum lot sizes of 20,000 square feet. I'm not sure exactly when it was zoned R3, but I know for certain it's been at least 23 years, because it's been zoned that way since before I started with the village.
How does that compare to properties near it?
The properties.
Zoning map, please?
Oh, sure. Is there a zoning map in here, Evan?
There should be one under my staff report, at least an area map.
Scroll down.
Zero keys.
Being finicky. There we go. So, yeah, you can see the subject properties R3 and the properties on the other side of Drew Avenue all the way over to County Line Road are R3. It's R2, which is a 2-acre minimum to the south. The lighter yellow to the west is R2A, and the area to the north is R2A.
R2B, I think, isn't it?
R2A, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, R2A.
Okay. Okay, and I was to understand that it's approved, that they're asking for a slight variation to
Yes.
what, and where, do you have those side by side?
Yes, well, do we have the as of right, the yield plan in here? So,
Yes, it should be in the petitioner's plan, yes. A basic plan is here, this page. It's,
So to answer
sheet
your question, Mayor, the existing zoning would allow an 8-lot subdivision. And there's a plan in here. Oh,
Back up.
missed it, right there. So under the current zoning, they would be entitled to divide the property as shown here on the screen.
That's what they're legally allowed to do.
Right. If they present that plan, the village would be obligated to approve it with only minor changes if so requested.
And so the question tonight, just for clarification, is it's either Plan A or Plan B.
Right, right.
Okay, and can you bring up Plan B again?
There it is.
This is not the site plan they were considering, just so we're clear on that. It's a-
Passed it already, maybe.
Oh, there were some minor
Yeah, can we see that?
changes. Where, is that in
It's
here?
the last page on their petition. That's page 94. Keep going down. One more.
There it is.
So this is the official site plan that was approved by the Plan Commission. There were a couple of changes that we made between the second and third meetings. The first is that some of the units were moved to respect the setback requirements from the right-of-way. In actuality, this site plan actually does meet, aside from having lots, it meets all of the setback requirements for an R3 subdivision, front, side, and rear of all the neighboring properties. Everything is 30 feet setback from the road and 20 feet setback from the right-of-way. Some of the units in the initial site plan were pretty close to the road. It would have resulted in cars parked in any driveway being parked in a right-of-way, which is not permitted under our traffic code. Under this plan, there's 20 feet of clear space in front of every unit that, in this case, really eliminates the need to park in the right-of-way. So you can have two cars in the garage, and then 2 cars in the driveway without interfering with any of the public right-of-way. And again, this is a public street with a public right-of-way. So if approved, we'll be plowing the snow, we'll be making sure the water mains go in and the like. But at the same time, we did make some adjustments to ensure that we had enough space to have the proper setbacks in all the units. Again, allowing it to retain the 50-foot setback from the southern property as well as the western property, as well as to retain a lot of the existing trees that are on the southern property line that provide a nice security blanket from this property, from the neighboring property to the south. So there were some tweaks made with the input of the Plan Commission by the petitioner.
And this was the plan that you, staff also recommended?
We didn't make a recommendation, but we've reviewed it and approved it. Or I should say approved it, we've reviewed it.
And what was the vote of the Plan Commission?
6-1 in favor.
I just want to get clarification on that so everybody knows what it is. So it's, on that note, any questions of Evan regarding the plan? Trustee Francis?
Was there some additional conditions or recommendations from the Plan Commission about landscaping, additional landscaping along the west property line?
Yes, there was a consideration that the landscaping, existing landscaping that exists today, ends about here. And so there are no trees from this point to the western property line. And so as a result of the street going in and the units going in here, all the trees would need to be cut down on this portion of the property here. And so because of that, there was no remaining landscaping. And so the Plan Commission recommended that additional landscaping be added in the western property line to provide a screening not only on the southern property line, but on the western property line as well. There was also a recommendation that anti-monotony standards be incorporated in terms of the building elevations as well as garage orientations. So there was a comment that the Plan Commission didn't want to see 8 front-loading garages. They wanted to see some side-load garages as a way to kind of break up the street a little bit. The petitioner has agreed to both conditions.
Thank you.
And I should add, those conditions would be fleshed out in the final PUD plans that have to be presented to the Plan Commission and the board.
Any other questions of Evan? Okay, there's some of the, there's one resident that wanted to speak. I assume this is the topic. Mr. Morrissey? If you'll come to the microphone, please. And
I know.
I couldn't.
It's a little surprising. Hi, Greg Morrissey. I live at 15214 81st Street. I'm a little disappointed I'm the only one here. I unfortunately missed the Plan Commission meeting last Monday, the 20th? I guess my concern, a couple of things, right? So you're granting a PUD here. From my understanding, based on some of the things I've heard, it was basically we'll either do this or else we're building 8 ugly homes. Like, good luck. I mean, I guess I'm hesitant to have you guys approve a PUD for basically 4.5 buildable acres when a PUD normally requires 40, just because of a threat of ugly homes going in on a straight road. My understanding is in a development, he has to basically, all stormwater retention has to be basically maintained, correct? Regardless of whether it's a PUD or just his regular 8 homes. So I would be hesitant to think, I mean, they've said, I guess I'd like to see independent engineering that his 4 homes on each side or 3 on each side and the 2 at the back meet the stormwater retention. I would dispute the fact that water just rolls unimpeded. Obviously, there's no hard surfaces there besides the ground. I would guess that there's some retention going on naturally with the ground and the landscaping and whatnot that exists currently. But really, I mean, my biggest concern is then, if this is granted, what happens, again, talking about precedent, what happens to the land to the east that's all also R3? There's 2 lots there on County Line. I brought this up to Evan but in an email, but there's 2 lots on County Line Road, I think, that are for sale for now. What happens there? Like, if somebody buys that and then they threaten something and, oh my God, well, they're threatening an ugly development, at least this gives us more control. And maybe then it's not 8 homes for 8 homes, maybe it's 20 homes for 8 homes, but the 8 homes they would have built is ugly. So again, it's about precedent. My worry is, how many homes are we going to try to fit? I mean, I don't think, in my limited experience with real estate, that you're going to get 8 homes in there without the PUD. And I don't know. I hate the idea of setting a precedent of when you set the rule of 40 acres for a PUD, and now it's 4.5 buildable. I mean, it's just, I mean, I would hesitate also the fact that it's 4.5 buildable acres, give or take, and even still being allowed 8 homes on there, because it's, I mean, 4.5 acres, you've got to address the fact that it's 4.5 acres in a wetland, so I'm a little disappointed in my neighbors too, but that's all right.
Thank you. Okay, back at the board. Any other discussion on the board?
Can you show what he can build without us? Okay, and he's asking for the PUD because he's moving the street?
The street and putting 2 less houses over on the,
Well, it's, the main reason that a PUD is even necessary is that instead of having 8 separate lots with private yards around the homes.
Oh, okay.
He's having 8 lots where there is no private yards.
All right.
All the yards are common space, so there'll be no tennis courts, no swimming pools, no gazebos or anything in the backyards. It'll be all open space.
and making room for a retention pond.
Right. Well, this has a retention pond too. Either way,
Right
they'll
up front.
be in
No, it's
compliance.
Not as obvious.
Right.
Where does it flood now?
Oh, it floods to the north.
It floods to the north, and I would
everywhere.
characteristics say it floods a lot of places around that intersection. A lot of yards are definitely impacted north of the buildable area.
And in this drawing, is there still a wall, retention wall to the north?
I don't believe so.
So in this,
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Trustee Francis?
We go back to the by right plan that the petitioner submitted, please, and zoom in on it, so all can see good. Thank you. Scroll up a little bit. So a couple comments on this. I'm disappointed to see that this keeps coming up. I attended all 3 plan commission meetings, and I have some comments on this. First of all, the housing pads for lots 4 and lot 6, take a close look at that. And your front living room looks out in your neighbor's side of his house. Who's going to buy that? Nobody. It's unmarketable. Those building pads have to be rotated 45 degrees so that they face the cul-de-sac, not facing the neighbors. Okay, and when you rotate it, you're going to lose footprint. And when you lose footprint, you're not going to be able to build your 4,000 square foot home. You might be able to build a 3,000 square foot home, not the 4,000 that he's showing there. Lot 5 is a beautiful lot if you like bowling alleys for a home. It's long and narrow. It's unmarketable. And let's not forget about lots 6, 7, and 8. That those lot owners would be responsible for maintaining the pond behind to the north of them, and also the wetlands to the north of them. Who wants that maintenance responsibility, and who wants that liability? Nothing attracts kids more than ponds and water. And who wants that liability? I know in Greenbrier, I've talked to homeowners in Greenbrier that share half of the responsibility of maintenance and liability for the ponds there. A home is on each side of the pond. There's a lot line down the middle of the pond. They share half the maintenance and half of the liability. Their liability policies are over $5 million just because it's wet and it attracts kids. So this to me is ridiculous. The detention area is quoted as 6,700 square feet. To get the same 2.2 acre feet that are being suggested on the plan that the Plan Commission approved, that pond would have to be 14 feet deep. We would never allow that for a detention area. So he's talking about underground detention, which we don't have anywhere in the village. So to me, this is just a scare tactic. What could be, he would never build this because he couldn't sell these homes. So I'm discounting this because it's unrealistic. And I'm disappointed to see it keeps coming up. Unbuildable. So that's my comments about this. I have some questions for the developer if he would like to come up. So the two ponds that you're suggesting in the approved site plan, are those wet ponds or dry ponds?
My name is Nick Patera. I'm here on behalf of Tony Perino, and we've met before, so I just wanted to let others know.
I'm sorry.
But thank you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I should have let you introduce yourself. So the two ponds you're suggesting on the approved site plan, are those wet ponds or dry ponds?
Those would be a wet bottom pond. They're shallow. The state of the industry now requires what they call best management practices, so that they are a shallow, wet bottom, not a deep blue water pond.
And will you be asking for an upcharge or additional, those lots command a premium price because they view those ponds?
I think the intent would be that they do get a better view to the north. I don't know that I have pricing at this point until we get some further counsel from the...
For example, lots 1 and 2, do those command a higher price because they're viewing the man-made ponds?
We're not at a point yet where we've put pricing
fair.
on this,
That's
and
fair.
I don't know that that's privy to this conversation, but I'd love to try and help you. I think one of the things that we did talk about with neighbors was a concern about us being equivalent value to the surrounding neighborhood, and that was, I think, a grounding point where we did say, yes, the homes, the character, and the disposition of this subdivision would be something that would be equivalent to the other surrounding properties to the east, to the north, to the west. It changes. Obviously, we changed to an R2. It's a 2-acre zoning. It's a pretty abrupt change. What have we done here with this planned development is to try and make something here that really is accommodating a transition. And so this is really trying to be a superior plan. I know you were kind of shooting holes in the 8-unit by right plan, and it wasn't the intent to be flippant about it, but I think that what we're trying to say is how do we create a superior plan, and that's why we're here tonight.
Well, this plan is superior to the by right plan. I will agree with that. And I would also state that if you had asked a freshman planning student to come up with a plan that will certainly get an F, that would be it. So, let's talk about the density. You had a chart in your presentation. I believe it's, if you scroll back up, there's a chart. You compared density to Savoy Club and to Lake Ridge Club and to a couple other parcels.
I'm familiar. If Doug's pulling that up, thank you.
One of your submittals. See if it's included. There it is. That's it. So you can zoom in on that to the data down below. So just a point of clarification. The proposed site is 8.87 acres, as we all know. The buildable area is 4.5 acres, I'm told. So the other 4-point-something acres you can't touch, you can't build on. Okay, so that in itself differs your property from the other properties you're comparing to. Lake Ridge Club, Garfield, and Savoy Club all have, they're 22.5 acres of Savoy Club, that's all buildable. Okay.
Can I offer
So let me finish.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So if I look at the buildable area, which is 4.5 acres, and take your number of 8 units, I come up with 1.8 units per acre, which is comparable to Savoy Club.
Savoy Club and some of the others on 179th, they're up to 5 units to the acre. This is less than 1 unit to the acre. It's a 0.9 units to the acre. So they're really not that comparable. So this diagram kind of says this is what we're not, as much as it says here's an example of some other developments. The developable portion or the buildable, saleable portion of this property that's not wetland, that's 5.43 acres, 5.43. If I take out the wetland buffer, just give me a minute and I'll get through this. If I take out the wetland buffer, 5.43 minus 1, sorry, I don't mean to get us buried in numbers. Take out 1.06, I end up with 4.37 acres of this property, not including the buffer, although that could be part of a lot. That buffer can be part of a lot. It may not be buildable, but I can end up with 4.37 acres minus the buffer. If I include the buffer, I have 5.43. The by right subdivision with a right-of-way, internal road, and 20,000 square foot lots ends up using up 4.32 acres out of the 4.37. So we're right on the button as far as saying it's defensible. It's not what we want to do, but it's not. I'm not playing games with trying to say I'm double dipping or I'm.
Never said that.
No, I know. I'm saying that. Sorry, I don't mean to be implying that. But we're not trying to do something here that's beyond what zoning would allow. What we're trying to come up with is a superior plan.
So go back now, and 4.3 acres, I was wrong. I was told 4.5. 4.3 acres are buildable, divided by 8 homes. It's 1.8 something homes per acre. You are saying it's 0.9, but you're including the wetlands, which are unbuildable, and the buffer, which is unbuildable, okay? And those other subdivisions you're comparing to don't have those constraints. So, matter of disagreement here, but it's, your density in the buildable area is comparable to Savoy Club. So,
I can say with confidence that the density that we have of the, what I would say is the developable portion of the property will support 8 lots with a public right-of-way without messing with numbers. Those numbers will prove it out.
okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you. Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions? Again, the plan commission recommendation is before you, and there's I'm sure there might be some questions you might want to ask before somebody makes a motion. Questions?
What was the, on the planning commission, there was one no vote. What was the reason for the no vote? Do we know?
Yes.
Yes, the no vote came at the belief that the PUD should have 6 units.
Not 8.
Correct.
What was the logic? I mean, other than just that it was more green space, that was the
less dense,
less density,
less dense.
And I truly think if we looked at the recording, the person who said this said, I think it should be 6 units.
Got it. And what did the petitioner did not like that? I take it, or no? Or wasn't?
I think there was just more support to keep it as is, because it doesn't sound like there was really a need to go to 6 per se. It wouldn't really drastically improve the site plan, because the site plan is kind of fixed the way it is on the street and the design overall. So.
Thank you. One more question came to mind. Could staff explain about how, in this plan approved by the Plan Commission, some of the, I'm not sure if it's the building pads or the lots or whatever encroach on the wetland setback?
Buffer?
Wetland buffer?
Encroaching the buffer, sure.
And there's averaging taking place?
Yes, that's exactly correct. So wetland buffers are kind of we'll call it a semi-protected area. We have to keep a 50-foot average. We can mitigate other places. There are things that we can do if you build just take a real example. These 2 lots right here, 4 and 5, they're clearly built into the buffer. But at other points, the petitioner can build additional mitigation elsewhere as part of that best management practice. That'll be part of the engineering approvals that they have to go through for at least 4 other agencies they have to clear, specifically DuPage County, who's in charge of administering their wetland ordinance. So there definitely will be some analyses that have to take place as to how they're impacting the wetland buffer and what they're going to do to fix it once they do so.
So in your opinion, in staff's opinion, do you believe, or with consulting with the village engineer and village administrator, that this averaging would need to take place if they would make a slight site adjustments to the plan so that they get all of these properties, all of these structures out of the buffer?
So to get all the structures out of the buffer, we believe that we have discussed this, the street would have to come more to the south to move it away. And I think there was a balancing of what do we do to the neighbor to the south and to the neighbor to the west in terms of accommodating setbacks while also maintaining proper wetland, lack of wetland impact, I should say. And I think this was kind of seen as a happy balance because there's only technically 2 lots at this point. There used to be 3 in the wetland buffer. So we did see some improvement there. I'm not saying we're all the way there. It'd be nice to have everything out of the wetland buffer, of course, to respect that environmental protection. But again, it's really kind of a balancing act, which impact do you choose, a setback or a wetland buffer?
Thank you, I can appreciate that, thank you.
I'd like to point out that I would, before any motions are made, that I've been walking past this property for 30 years. Actually, sometimes I used to run past it, but walking and biking, and I watched the house, when I've been there long enough to know that, to have seen people walking in and out of the old house that's been dilapidated. And the position of this property is very unique. It's, to the north is swampland, and it always floods. And I know that the petitioner was also trying to think of some way of assisting that. But then to the south, there's a huge property which owned by the former President McDonald's. You may know it as the guest house is probably the size of my house. So I'm personally, I really am impressed with how they've been able to make this with this new layout so that it would be not affecting the resident to the south. And probably at the same time, hopefully, being a fellow businessman, have more properties with better view and make some money. And I also know the petitioner is looking to move into one of these houses. As I remember, at least that was a couple, 3 years ago when you first mentioned it. Is that still the plan? Oh, no? Oh, okay. I thought it was originally. Now, at least you're doing it within that spirit. So. Yeah. So, in any case, this is a superior, in my own opinion. Cosmetically, is also more consistent with the environment, because 81st Street Drew changed as it turns in 81st Street. It goes around the curve. It's more much more aesthetically pleasing and consistent with the environment. So. I'm not that creative, but I'm glad your architects are. So, are there any other discussions or questions about the Planning Commission's recommendation 6-1 to approve it?
I hope this is a brief question. I had attended some of the Planning Commission meetings as well, not the most recent one, but the prior ones. There was some talk about the wetland getting deepened somehow, or making it. Is that still a part of this, or no? Not anymore.
No.
Okay.
Basically, the initial plan was, just for history's sake, the initial plan was to have the wetland significantly expanded, almost doubled in size, and then Drew Avenue actually be raised. So it'd be quite a bit of engineering involved, but it would have been more units. And so we went to the pre-app meeting with the county, and the county said you cannot use wetland for stormwater detention, and thus the wetland is basically untouchable.
With all the problem we've had in that area, are you sure all the plans that we've done are going to alleviate that water problem?
Well, that's why we have additional reviews in place. This is a preliminary plat of approval, which basically approves a site plan. And once this is approved, should it be approved, of course, at that point, it's kind of an authorization of direction to the petitioner to go ahead and say, okay, now please invest in some real modern, beyond preliminary engineering plans. And if it does prove to not work, they have to come back to the preliminary plan stage to really reinvent their site plan to make sure the engineering does work. So that's the most important thing here. Just because there is a consideration on the agenda tonight to approve a preliminary plat, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be built. As I said, there are 12 total levels of government approval that they have to work through. It's a lot. It'll take them a while to get through all that. And there's a chance that one of them may fail, and they might have to come back and say, there's not enough X or Y of the wetlands to impact it. It may come back. And so there's not a lot of risk in approving this, should you approve to do that, because there are so many other agencies, including our own agency. Our own village engineer has to approve this, that ultimately have to get worked in before a final plat can be approved and building can begin. So, long way to go.
And just to be clear, you use the word alleviate. This will not alleviate any flooding whatsoever. It will not contribute to it, but that's what Evan was saying earlier, that the petitioner, the property owner, actually began with the idea that he could alleviate, he could somehow help the situation, but but the county shut that down because they will not allow anyone to do any significant work in that wetland area. So after that, the focus just became, how can we how can we make sure we do not have any impact on that whatsoever? And in order to not have any impact, they are actually detaining 21% more stormwater than the code requires. So they're sure that the runoff from this plus 21% will be captured in the ponds and released at a slow rate so that it doesn't impact that flooding situation or the wetlands. And that's what will get reviewed by a dozen or more engineers and agencies, and only then will they be allowed to go forward.
Okay. Any other questions, Bevan or Doug? Do I have a motion to approve it? C?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify that there are some additional issues with subdivision improvements and the conditions that the Plan Commission recommended. Those will come back to you for review at a later date. You're basically just approving the preliminary concept plan.
In the motion?
Yes, we'll prepare an ordinance for your next meeting to including those conditions.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second to direct staff to prepare an ordinance. With that, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
No.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
5-1.
Motion passes 5-1. Welcome to the neighborhood, Mr.
No,
Farino.
we're still gonna come back after they review everything to make
Good
sure.
luck getting to the
all the water-
neighborhood, I think is the right word. With 12 approvals, good luck.
I hope you, I hope some of those homes come with boats. Just, Drew gets tough on those couple times a year. So,
Can I just say one thing?
I'm sorry, really, this is,
I'm not, I want to get this on the record. I just want to make sure everybody's aware we spent an hour and a half talking about 4 tables at Capri and then set precedent on a PUD for something 45 acres or 35 acres below size in 15 minutes. So it's on the record.
just for the record, the Plan Commission went through this for hours and hours and hours. Despite what that resident, little cheap shot, he decided to give the Plan Commission to the board. I support the board and I support the Plan Commission.
I echo those comments, Mayor, and that's what my votes mostly reflected, that I support the legal work done by the Planning Commission.
It's sometimes unheard of what some people will say just on their own. And we have to, I'm sorry, I have to be the bad guy and keep with protocol, but I just want to say, again, welcome to Burr Ridge. You already have an office here, I'm sure, I know, but, oh, okay. Well, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Under other considerations for announcement, deliberation, and/or discussion? Okay, resident comments? Reports and communications for village?
Resident comments? Did you say that?
Yes.
Resident. I listened to the conversation for 4 hours about parking and everything else that's going on here. The village has had an absolute disaster in that parking lot. The first thing that happened was a deal with Chase Bank that should never have been built there. Those 47 parking places that left, and I still have the picture from Zillow that I counted. 4 of you people weren't on the board. I know one guy who voted against it. You voted for it. You voted for it. You were at the final vote. 47 parking places. Every place in that place was in trouble. You didn't own the property. That's what you said. That bank gives you $1,000 a month, I hope, because that's what they promised you, against taxes that you weren't getting. If you would have charged $2 a car and bought that parking place, you would have made far more. And you wouldn't have hurt the village, and you wouldn't have had this conversation tonight. 47 parking places disappeared. That bank could have been built by Lifetime Fitness without a problem. Nobody would have known the difference. Driving another block wouldn't have hurt anybody to go to their bank. But nobody did that. And you all sat here talking about this. You hurt your own community. 2 of you. 2 of you. Yeah, Mickey. Tell me why no. Tell me no.
Well, the village administrator who was heading up of course, the community development at the time, was early educated everybody to the fact that's what it was built for. That property was buildable, and the only choice was it retail or was it a bank?
You could have made it a parking place. It was a parking place. You didn't have to change anything. You could have bought it and put it.
Who was going to buy the parking spot?
$2 a park a car. $2 for the night. 47. Do the math. It's 30 days. You beat your $1,000 you're getting a month.
Oh, you're talking about for charging and parking?
Absolutely. Charging $2. Why do people pay for valet? What do they pay? $2? $5? What do they pay?
It's free. It's free.
Want to tell? It's free?
It's free.
Excuse me. Ask the young man there how many tips he gets a night and what he gets.
You don't have to tip. It's free.
No, it's not free. They're paying they're paid $2 to park it.
They don't charge me to park.
Well, you're a prima donna, but everybody else pays. Trust me. Don't go there. That's bullshit. That is totally crap.
You buy the land.
I would have.
Oh.
You don't think I could?
Not saying.
How dare you talk to me like that? How dare you?
Excuse me.
How dare you? No, that's just wrong.
Excuse me, John.
I was talking.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to sit down. You're really.
You want to throw people
I'm
out,
not sure,
want people sit down, but
I'm not sure why.
tell me what I didn't say was the truth.
I'm not sure why.
Tell me
I've
what
asked,
I didn't say was the truth.
You're out of line.
How am I out of line?
You're out of line.
How?
And the property was already sold. It wasn't your property. You had that choice then. I'm not quite sure why you decided that.
At the time that this
is not a town hall meeting.
When this all took place, that property wasn't sold. Janet was there. Mickey got a $6,000 deal. She wouldn't recuse herself on the vote. And that's the reason why this thing got into this thing, or that bank wouldn't have been built there. Tell me that's not true, Mickey. Tell me that's not true.
John.
Tell me that's not true, Mickey.
I'm not here to argue with you, but your discussion is over.
Just lie to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
Mayor Straub, for the record, the ownership of that Chase Bank property, to my knowledge, hasn't changed for 20 years. It's been under separate ownership from County Line Square since I've worked in this village, and it still is under separate ownership from County Line Square.
Thank you. Reports of communications from village officials.
I just want to, many residents are probably already aware, but there was some news from our neighbors in Willowbrook here about that Sterigenics facility and stuff, and I know there's a lot online. I'm not that informed about it yet, but I was made aware this weekend about it, and I hope that we're going to be looking into it and seeing how that impacted our residents, or didn't impact, hopefully, but there's some question whether there's been toxic gas released for quite a long time that may have blown towards Burr Ridge and through our school area and where Gower is and stuff. So I'm concerned about it, and I know, Doug, you're looking at it, so I just want to make sure that people are aware about it, and there's things online to look into it for more information, but it deeply
Actually, on that note, before you go any further, I have a statement from the mayor of Willowbrook. I asked him to prepare that I would be able to read at this board meeting. Unfortunately, it's a very long one. But I will give you this without the details in the middle. We'll have you post, if you will, on the village board, on the village website, the complete letter. But Frank Trilla, the mayor of Willowbrook, I said, here's what we know. This afternoon, the agency that wrote this report, EPA, of course, released a statement. It says the emissions of ethylene oxide from the Sterigenics International Incorporated facility in Willowbrook are not an immediate threat to public health and are not considered to be an emergency situation. There's multiple paragraphs about the statement, goes on to say about the ASTDR and the EPA, et cetera. But based on examination of available data, does not expect this to levels in the air to be high enough to cause immediate harm to health. And the last two paragraphs are that the Village of Willowbrook, along with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, has planned a public forum for residents, those who work in the village, anyone interested, to ask questions regarding the report from the agency for toxic substances and disease registry, ASTDR, or ATSDR. It's a division of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Present at the forum will be representatives from Sterigenics, ATSDR, US EPA, Office of Air Quality Planning Standards, a division of EPA, Illinois EPA, and DuPage County Health Department. So where it will be on Wednesday, August 29th at 7 p.m. at Ashland Place. Once again, questions regarding the issue in Willowbrook, which was somewhat, it was obviously serious, but maybe a little bit, to stop the rumors. They want to get the word out that there is no serious health risks. And there is a meeting on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. at Ashland Place this coming Wednesday, August 29th.
Thank you very much for getting that information out.
We will post all that on our website tomorrow.
Literally, it got sent to me at 6:15 p.m. tonight. So that was
There's a lot of concerned residents. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Thank you.
So we'll post information on our website, this letter and some other things, and also some links to official information from the United States EPA, Illinois EPA, and other agencies that are involved. So residents can...
Information we can gather.
Excellent.
Get it out.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Also, on a brighter note, the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, otherwise known as, previously known as RIC, Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, did receive it was in the magazine, it was in the newspaper under Business Week, that they did receive for the 28th year in a row the *1 rehabilitation institute in the country. And of course, as you know, Burr Ridge now has one of the two largest facilities outside their I guess $550 million facility in Streeterville that was built. One of the two largest ones in the suburbs. One is in Burr Ridge, and so they have bragging rights. 28 years in a row. Congratulations, Shirley Ryan. So.
Which suburb is the other one in?
Pardon me?
Which other suburb is it in? There's one in the city.
Yeah, there's one, I believe it's in Glenview, but it's not, they don't provide the same services. I don't know how it compares, but so I'm not sure if we have bragging rights at the largest one, but certainly the newest one and the most technologically advanced, and also one that I happen to have used myself the last 2 months due to a shoulder injury, and I would highly recommend them. I will just give that little commercial.
It's a feather in the cap.
Yes. At this time, Doug, I know we talked earlier about closed session, deferring it until next time.
It's up to you. If you, if you'd rather wait, if you think it's lengthy or whatever, if you just prefer to wait 2 weeks, it's fine.
Have a straw vote. Do you want to? It's nothing pressing. You want to use the closed session or have the closed session next board meeting or tonight?
Okay with tonight?
Tonight's fine.
How long do you figure it's going to take?
From my end, not very long, but it depends on how many questions you have.
You can keep it to 10 minutes or less. I'd sure appreciate that.
I can do that.
If you think we're going to have a lot of questions, we should defer it, in my opinion.
Let's defer it.
Defer it.
This is 2 Mondays in a row of long meetings.
Yeah.
3 hours. Okay. So we will defer the closed session.
I think we
Need a
probably.
motion for that?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to defer the closed. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor, do I have a roll call?
Aye.
Aye.
All those in favor say aye. Any nays? Okay, so that's 6-0 to defer the closed session. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion was for Zach.
Oh, we skipped that, yeah.
Honoring non-residents? Okay, sorry.
Okay, now, who made the motion to adjourn, please?
Me.
Tony made the
Tony.
motion to adjourn, I'll
Zach
second it.
seconded.
You second, oh,
Thank you for catching that. And it was unanimous. And the motion to adjourn, okay, yes? Okay, roll, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?